Reddit is home to over 70 million users per day. There are millions of subreddits ranging from the heartwarming and uplifting to the controversial and even illegal. There's truly a community for just about everything you can think of, and out of the millions of posts made every day, there are bound to be some crazy ones. Today, we're going to deep dive into the most insane, depraved, satisfying, and interesting family drama of Reddit.
Parents canceled my birthday party because of my spoiled younger brother. I'm 20 meters, and this happened when I was 14. I have a brother who is about 6 years younger than me, and he was extra coddled by my parents for having been diagnosed with high-functioning autism when he was 4. But other than that, he seems very normal, just unbelievably spoiled, and he used it to get his way a lot. And by a lot, I mean nearly all the time. Anything I had, he also had to have, so that meant we had doubles of almost everything that weren't shared items. And anything he had that I didn't, he'd rub in my face any way he could. When I was 11, I begged my parents for a 3DS for my 12th birthday. I got one but was then told to lend it to my brother whenever he wanted it, or else I'd have it taken away. Which it was, a lot. When my aunt found out after seeing my parents forcibly take my 3DS out of my hands to give to my brother on one of her visits, she let loose on them for such blatant favoritism. They returned my 3DS immediately, then blamed me for the situation after my aunt left. But they didn't make me give it to my brother again. Instead, my parents went out a few days later and bought another 3DS as a surprise gift for my brother. On several of mine and other people's birthdays, my brother made a huge fuss because the party wasn't all about him, even going so far as to outright state that he was upset because he wasn't getting any gifts or getting to blow out the candles on the cake. My parents learned the hard way that they couldn't enable my brother the way they'd have liked at those parties and were actually kicked out of a few for trying. And because of that, other kids at his school stopped inviting him to birthday parties altogether. For me, my birthdays were some of the only days I had that I got to have about me because otherwise, my parents forced my life to revolve around my little brother. The year prior to when this story took place, my parents ended up paying more attention to him the entire time of my 13th birthday and even asked me if I'd let my brother blow out my candles for me because he was upset and pouting. I refused because I wanted to blow out my own candles. They called me a spoiled brat at first until my aunt intervened and chastised them for their favoritism yet again and stated how much she had noticed how my brother gets nearly everything between the two of us just because he's autistic. My parents got no support from anyone else there other than my brother, who was still crying because he wasn't getting to blow out my candles. And because he didn't get his way, he tried to outright spit on my cake out of spite. But my awesome aunt thankfully blocked him before he got the chance, then scolded him till he ran to my mom in tears. My parents took a lot of heat from the other adults there and then promised to never ask me to let my brother blow out my candles again. But they pretty much just went through the motions for the rest of the party. My aunt pretty much took over coordinating everything from that point. The following year, a couple of weeks before my birthday, my parents sat me down and told me they were still going to get me some gifts and a small cake, but my birthday party was effectively canceled to avoid my brother having another meltdown. I told them I couldn't believe they were doing this to me, and they just seemed to shrug it off without a care. So at school over the next week, I told my friends, my teachers, and even my school counselor. All of them were appalled by my parents' lack of consideration or empathy. The vice principal even found out and consoled me, and all of this got back to my parents through social media. My parents ended up grounding and gaslighting me for telling so many people, but that didn't stop me from still telling everyone at school that I was grounded for just being upset my birthday was canceled for no good reason. I guess that made it a lot worse because several of my parents' own friends, along with parents of other kids at my school, called them up or sent them FB messages, basically saying, "What the hell is wrong with you?" And suddenly, I was ungrounded. I didn't get an apology either. My dad just walked into my room with his arms crossed, told me my grounding was over early, and then walked out. That was it. I thought my party was still canceled because nobody said anything about it, and my brother thought it hilarious and rubbed it in my face that I wasn't going to get to celebrate. But by the end of the 2 weeks, my parents held a surprise party for me at my favorite restaurant and then started claiming that was their intent all along. I knew it wasn't from what I'd seen. Everyone was incredibly unhappy with them for what they did, and it showed with any interactions family members had with my parents. So they ended up doing the surprise party to try and save what little of their reputations they had left. But I'm pretty sure they had to pay through the nose that day to just accommodate me. I got dinner with all my friends at my favorite restaurant that had a small arcade and even got the PS4 game system I'd been jonesing for at the time. I could tell it was all pretty much planned and bought last minute because my dad had a look about him that my aunt comically described as looking like a moth had flown out of his wallet. My brother, of course, made a huge fuss that I got that surprise party. But with so many of my friends and their parents there, my mom and dad finally put their feet down on my brother to stop his tantrum when he wanted to push my cake off the table. My brother ended up getting a timeout for the first time since he was a toddler, and my mom had to stay with him to make sure he didn't do anything crazy. And he did try several times to run to the cake or stack of presents. Who knows what he would have done were it not for the fact at least one adult was always on guard. Even my dad stood guard to keep him away. My mom ended up having to remove my brother and herself from the party entirely and took my little bro to a McDonald's nearby so he could have fun in their play area. And I heard later she spent at least an hour trying to get him to come out of the playplace tube structure, and he only did so because he had to use the bathroom, then tried to run right back in again. My parents never tried to cancel my birthday again while I still lived with them, though they never again tried as hard or spent as much. For the remaining 4 years I was under their roof, my birthday parties consisted of a local pizza parlor, a cake without even my name written on it, and never again anything as expensive as a new game system. I don't mean to sound spoiled, but I was a bit disappointed I never got a cake with my name on it again. My aunt called my parents out on that each year, and each year they claimed they forgot to get the cake decorated. I'm pretty sure that the reason my name was never written on another cake was because my brother always refused to eat pieces of cake that had writing of someone else's name on it at any party, and they couldn't put his name on any of my cakes or it would have looked very bad for them. But the fact that I still got a day that was just about me at all and not my brother was still fantastic in my book, especially because just about everything else revolved around him during each of my remaining birthday parties while still living at home. My brother made a fuss and my mom took him somewhere else to calm him down. I was still required to share my PS4 with my brother, but it was still mine, and I took it with me when I moved out at 18. Little bro did not like that and had a huge fit till my parents went out and bought another PS4 for him. When I moved out, they finally had to deal with how they'd raised my brother so spoiled because I wasn't there to help them with him anymore. On his recent 14th birthday, he went mental on our parents for not getting him a PS5. He is now currently grounded for I don't know how long after causing hundreds or maybe even thousands in collateral damage during his rampage. He picked up a chair and just started destroying anything that was in front of him with it, and my parents just looked mentally checked out when I saw them last. My aunt has also told me they confided in her that they wish they could send my brother to military or boarding school in the future because they can't handle the monster they created anymore. But there's no way they can afford that. I'd be lying if I said I didn't find it ironically funny. Update 1. My parents were thrown out of a child's birthday party because they asked the stupidest thing imaginable. For those who read my previous post about how my parents tried to cancel my 14th birthday, they knew very well what my brother was like during birthday parties that weren't his own, and they tried to enable his behavior in any way they could just because he's high-functioning autistic. Well, that rampant spoiling didn't go well with people outside of the family, like at all. This happened, I think, when my brother was around 6 to 7 years old. A neighbor boy down the street was having his birthday party, and my brother got invited because they were sort of friends, but probably because they knew my parents would bring a gift. And they did. I don't remember what it was, though, nor do I really care. My parents dragged me along to this party, even though I'd have rather stayed home and played video games. I was bored and sitting down almost the entire time, so I got to witness pretty much the whole situation. It started when my brother was caught picking up gifts off the table and shaking them. The mother of the birthday boy told him to stop, and my parents tried to defend my brother and say he was harmless. But the lady knew what my brother was really like and had my parents move him away from the presents. There were some games that the kids were playing. I don't remember what they were, but I do remember my brother tried to be the center of attention as much as possible with each game. The birthday boy got first pick slots to turn on them all because it was his birthday. But my brother freaked out because he didn't get to be first, and my parents did ask the birthday boy's mother if my brother could get the first pick turns. The lady not only refused but told my parents to get my brother under control, or we'd all be asked to leave. Then came time for the cake. The mother lit the candles for the birthday boy, and the adults started singing the happy birthday song. They only got as far as singing the birthday boy's name in the song before my brother burst into a tantrum at the table. He grabbed the side of the table and started trying to violently shake it. My parents had to hold my brother back for a moment, and then I saw my mother go up and talk to the mother of the birthday boy again about something, and the poor lady looked positively disgusted. I learned later that she'd asked her to let my brother blow out the candles first, and then they could redo it. The lady told my mother that it would be best if we left, and then they went back to trying to redo the birthday song. Well, my brother couldn't take it and ran to the table and shoved the whole cake right at the birthday boy. I mean, he used his arm to literally clothesline the cake, and it hit right into that poor kid's face. The whole room was silent for a few seconds, and then a bunch of the kids started laughing. Then the birthday boy started crying, and the adults were all mortified except for my parents. My mother just started hugging my brother tightly and acting like a Karen by saying this could have been prevented if they just let my brother blow out the candles first. The mother of the birthday boy was cleaning up chocolate cake off her son and screamed at my parents to get out. The other kids there started crying because it had finally hit them that now there was no cake. My mother started dragging my brother out, but he broke free of her and then pushed over the table with all the presents on it. I grabbed him and held him in a headlock till my parents grabbed him. I apologized profusely to the mother of the birthday boy and said I wasn't on my parents' side in the matter. Yeah, that's right, little 12-year-old me had to apologize for my own parents. My dad yelled at me to get moving or I could walk home. I said I'd walk home. It was literally a 1/4 mile down the street. I stayed and helped clean up the mess my brother made. The lady thanked me and said that I was a good egg, but my brother was just rotten. Someone went out and got another cake while the birthday boy had to take a shower because he was covered in cake. All of the mess was cleaned up, and they redid the birthday song. After the party was over, the mother of the birthday boy wrote something out on a piece of paper. It was a handwritten invoice to my parents for the destroyed cake, along with a written threat to call the police as someone there with a camera caught everything. I handed the invoice to my parents, and they really didn't look happy when they read it. Then they gave me the cash and told me to take it back to the lady, so I did, and that was pretty much it. Neither that kid nor his family ever associated with my brother or my parents ever again. But the messed up thing is that at another birthday party months later, the same situation nearly repeated entirely. My mother asked the parents to let my brother blow out the candles first, gave BS excuses as to why, and they outright refused. And my mother acted like a total Karen. My brother tried to knock down the cake. I was on guard and intercepted him. Then we were told to leave. It was after that my brother was no longer invited to birthday parties that were not relatives. And then on my next birthday in that same year when I turned 13, my parents tried to get me to let my brother blow out my candles, and my aunt tore into them for that. It was then, I guess, that my parents decided that if I couldn't share, then next year I shouldn't have a party at all. And any previous readers know how that turned out. Update 2. My parents enabled my little brother's mini bike mayhem. When I was 17, I bought a used mini bike and used it to get to and from a part-time job. Those who've read my previous posts know what my little brother is like. The boy my parents extra coddled because he was diagnosed as high-functioning autistic. And anything I had, my brother had to have too. And if I refused to give it, my parents generally took it, at least until the behavior was exposed to the public when my parents tried to cancel my 14th birthday. After that, my parents stopped forcing me to give my stuff to my brother whenever he wanted it, and that led to some huge tantrums from him. My brother would look for things around the house to throw to the floor and break, usually dishes. My parents actually stocked up on plates from second-hand stores because of that. When I got the mini bike, my brother was upset I would never let him ride it, but he's destructive with all his stuff. Every time he broke his BMX, I'm the one who had to fix it. Change a flat, new pedals, new tire, new handlebars, new brake line, etc. He's got a stunt BMX that he begged for, and my parents spent hundreds on it. But as much as he loves it, he never fixes it himself or properly takes care of it, just calls me over begging me to fix it. My parents got him the parts and have the tools, but he never bothers to do anything more than pump up a tire. And even then, he usually tries to get someone to do it for him. He's also very careless in where he leaves the bike. He left it in a neighbor's driveway, and its handlebars got run over by the neighbor's van. He somehow destroyed the pedals, and a new pair had to be put on. He broke the rear brake line while having a tantrum too. The tire was understandable, though, since those were out, but it wasn't hard to swap it, and I shouldn't have had to come over on a Saturday to do it when my brother is perfectly capable of doing it himself. So damn right I'm not letting him take my mini bike on a joy ride, especially with gas prices being so high these days. The mini bike gets like 60 miles per gallon, so what if it only goes 40 miles per hour? I only have a 5-mile commute anyway. About a month before my brother's 14th birthday, my parents called me, begging me to come over and fix the BMX again. Little bro had worn the rear tire down to its threads. I was annoyed, but I came over anyway because they offered to pay me. I swapped the tire and sat down for a bottled water because it was like 100 degrees that day. My brother watched me work on the bike till I was done. His helmet was on, so I figured he was just waiting to go riding on his bike. But the moment my back was turned, I heard my mini bike start up outside and then take off. Little bro took off like a rocket down the street on it before I could get out of the garage. I freaked out, but my parents tried to play it off. Though when I didn't placate them, they said they'd get my mini bike back right away. But for them, that was more like just waiting till my brother came back with it. I was annoyed, and I wanted to call the police, but I'm not sure if they'd call it a domestic issue or not. My brother finally came back an hour later. He'd somehow not crashed, but the moment he saw me, he took off again. He drove the bike till it ran out of gas, and my parents had to go get him. To say I was furious was an understatement, but my parents basically rolled their eyes, handed me $40, and claimed it wouldn't happen again. I said it better not, or I'd call the cops next time. Not sure if it would help, but they seemed to take my warning. I had to push my mini bike to the nearest gas station to fill up before I could go home. Before I left, I told my parents that if my brother wants a mini bike so bad, then they should get him one. But then they pulled a 180 and said he wasn't ready to have one because it's a big responsibility and that it was too dangerous because it's practically a motorcycle. I mean, really? They just let him steal mine for like 2 hours to go joy riding to God knows where, and they don't want to get him one themselves? Whatever. I'm used to their hypocrisy by now. The last time I went to my parents' house, my brother was massively grounded and in his room for his birthday rampage I mentioned in my first post. But just to be sure, I pulled the spark plug wire off my bike before I entered the house. My brother was glaring at me from his window when I left. I just gave him a goofy wave and drove off. Update 3. I suggested to my parents that they sell a bunch of my brother's stuff to get some of their money back for his rampage. They did not hesitate. But wait, there's more. Well, a while ago, someone here commented the idea that my parents should sell a bunch of my brother's stuff. So I talked to my parents about how they could probably recoup some of their losses from the birthday rampage by selling a lot of my brother's stuff. I was surprised by how readily they agreed it was a good idea. I mean, it was like a light bulb moment for them. Then, over the weekend, they had a big garage sale. They sold my brother's bike, his video game systems, everything. I went to help out with the sale and could hear my brother crying in his room. All of the video game systems he had were sold. And I mean, there were a lot of them. He had a GameCube, a Wii, a 3DS, a Switch, a PS2, a PS3, a PS4, an Xbox 360, an Xbox One, and a ton of games for them all. And they sold all of them. I was pretty tempted to buy something from the sale myself, but I knew if my brother were to be made aware that I had something he used to own, who knows what he might do. So I held back. The bike alone went for $30. They also sold his TV, his RC cars, his drone, and pretty much anything else electronic he owned. They are in the process of selling his gaming PC online now as well. There's a cheap laptop too, but it was mainly used for school, and he was denied access to it for anything else. My parents told me that my brother's room had been stripped of everything but the essentials. While I was visiting during the sale, my brother walked out of his room once, saw me, and then ran back into his room crying loudly. I know fake crying from him when I hear it, and it was as fake as it gets. My parents know this too and have not fallen for his game. I asked them if he was going to therapy, and they said they really have no choice but to do that. And they fully admitted this was all their fault for enabling him for so long. I could have rubbed it in their faces, but I think the look they saw on my face was enough that they understood. For the past several years, they've been in progressively worse and worse denial about their bad parenting. Friends and family have been telling them for a long time now that they went way too far spoiling my brother, and that not only would it come back on them one day, but it would also mean that my brother may be incapable of functioning as an adult. And if that's the case, he'd expect someone to provide for his every need forever, and I would not become his caretaker when they become too old. My brother hadn't shown much improvement over the next few weeks. He was still being a brat, fake crying, getting into more trouble, and even stole another kid's cell phone at school. He was caught playing on it in his closet, and my parents had to return it to the school to find out who it belonged to. Last week, I had an idea and suggested a family intervention. My parents were hesitant when I brought it up, but they reluctantly agreed to it. I'm sure their hesitation was because an intervention would put them on the spot along with my brother. Then, on the next possible day, all close family and some friends could gather at my parents' house. We formed a circle of chairs in the living room, initially without my brother in the room. My aunt spoke first, and oh boy, did she let them have it. She'd written an entire speech that we all silently listened to. My parents tried to interject from time to time but were silenced. When it came to be my turn to speak, I also read a speech I composed, basically repeating everything I've told on Reddit thus far and plenty more. My grandparents went next, and it just sort of followed down the line from there. My mother was in tears, and my father just held her. They both apologized to me heavily and said they were terrible parents and that they ruined my childhood. I'll never get that back. My aunt loudly stated that it should not have come to this for them to realize their own hypocrisy, and from now on, they needed to do better, not only for my sake but especially for the sake of my brother so he can grow up normal. My brother was brought into the room next, and he was seated away from my parents because my mother would have an urge to coddle him when he was upset. It didn't take long for the family to lay into my brother. He tried fighting us a lot, but when excuses like if only they just let me have my way were about all he could say, we all let him have it about how that's not how the world works. He tried getting help from our mother, but she refused to look at him. He started huffing and acting like he was hyperventilating, then intentionally fell to the floor. It's not the first time he's done this. My aunt just told him to stop milking it and get up. He screamed at her that we were all ruining his life and he wishes we were all dead. My parents were horrified. My brother refused to get up off the floor and kept breathing heavily to pretend to have some sort of attack. So everyone just left him lying there while they each said their piece about why they were there to him. He screamed at random a few times but didn't move from where he'd laid down. Eventually, everyone started leaving, and my parents had to actually drag my brother back to his room because he refused to get up off the floor. He's not used to people having no sympathy for him, especially from our parents. This is going to be a long uphill battle. My aunt has offered to chip in for therapy, and my parents have taken her up on it. Let's hope therapy does my brother some good. Edit. Context. Some have been asking what happened with my brother's birthday rampage. Well, to put it simply, he didn't get a PS5, so he went mental with a chair and destroyed whatever he could with it, which was finally the breaking point for my parents, and they grounded him severely. Update 4. My spoiled brat brother has finally been allowed some privileges, and he hates them. Since the family intervention, my parents have kept my brother in check, and they are doing okay in terms of making up for years of treating me like crap. They've even promised to host my next birthday and have my favorite cake with my name on it. My brother did overhear this because my parents had him doing dishes in the kitchen, and he just stopped what he was doing and went right to his room. No fake crying, just a complete shutdown. He still glares at me from his window every time I leave when I come to visit. A little while ago, my parents allowed my brother some privileges for good behavior. Though to my brother, they're basically the opposite of anything he'd like. My parents decided that he could have a little fun for good behavior, so my dad dug out his old N64 and Game Boy Color from the 90s. He still had most of his old games for both systems and also had an old CRT TV to hook them up to. When they were offered to my brother, he just complained that they were old and boring. My dad just said he could suit himself then and go back to reading. It took one night before my brother was begging to have the old 90s game systems. He used to have many game systems, a gaming PC, and even a gaming chair with Bluetooth speakers on it. Now all he has is a folding chair or his bed to sit on when gaming. I came by for a visit around the time he first got the N64 because my parents wanted to have me over for dinner, and I got to see my brother in his room yelling at the old CRT TV while playing Mario 64. He really wasn't happy, especially since he couldn't even go online to check for guides, walkthroughs, or cheat codes. For the Game Boy Color, I saw he had some Pokemon games and at least one Donkey Kong. My dad has said that if my brother is extra good by the end of the summer, they'll upgrade him to a Game Boy Advance. My parents quickly realized, though, that the Game Boy Color would eat AA batteries, so my brother has to use a power cord for it now. And he does play it, maybe because he used to have a phone in his hands playing app games so much. Because my brother likes cycling but no longer owns a bike since our parents sold it, he was without an outlet to exercise. My dad found a used exercise bike on FB Marketplace and put it in my brother's room. He also got a used CD player mini boombox from somewhere the same day. So yeah, my brother just rides that exercise bike since he can't go outside unless it's to do chores, and he rides it aggressively. He tunes into whatever music gets him going, and then he rides that exercise bike hard. From the look on his face, I'd call it hate riding, almost like what you'd expect to see on the face of a vindictive prison inmate exercising in their cell and waiting for the day they can get out and get revenge. I had mentioned this to my parents, and they have the same worries that I do. So my dad started burning CDs with my brother's favorite music that used to be on his gaming computer, which they also sold. Each burned CD has 10 songs, and he would get one for every week of good behavior. He's only gotten one so far since this started, not because of bad behavior, but because not enough time has gone by for him to get more. I'm not sure if I'd call my brother's behavior good. He's just not really being bad. I don't hear him complaining out loud anymore most of the time, but I see it in his face, especially when he glares at me from his window when I get on my mini bike to go home. He definitely resents me, but it's not the same look he gives our parents when they aren't looking. He glares at them like they destroyed his life. But if I were to put it into words, he glares at me with envy, like I have everything he wants. The look just seems to say, just wait till I'm 18. I remember having those same thoughts when I wanted to move the hell out after high school, but I made sure I had life plans with the help of my aunt when I moved out. But my brother doesn't know anything about how to do that, so he's probably still thinking of it in the simplest ways a kid usually would. Oh great, now I'm sounding like a know-it-all. I have tried to talk with my brother, but he doesn't have much to say. I've been stopping by every few days to spend some time with him. We don't speak much because he's gotten very quiet, but he does seem to enjoy having someone to play with since our parents won't. He eagerly hands me a controller every time I'm there. We've mostly been playing racing games like Mario Kart on Dad's old N64 in my brother's room, and he gets pretty aggressive while playing. He keeps swinging the controller around wildly with nearly every move he makes and has even shoved me over a few times when he was losing. I've learned to brace my legs so he can't do that. He had a few light tantrums for losing but is getting a little better. I've had some GameFAQs walkthroughs and cheat codes for some of the games he's been playing on the old N64 printed out at the local library and put them in a binder for him, and that's made him a little nicer to me. Our parents wanted to get some stuff for summer homeschooling for my brother, but I warned them that was probably not a good idea. He's already in an almost constant state of anger, and the goal is to mellow him out and make him more accepting that life won't go his way like it used to anymore, not piss him off even more. My dad got angry with me about how he's the father and not me, and that sparked an argument where I reminded him of the things that went on over the past decade. All of the favoritism, all of how I was blamed for so much, even how I had to hide my money at my aunt's house because they kept letting my brother try to steal it. I didn't outright say he's a bad parent, but it was heavily implied. He backed off, and my mom told him I was right and trying to force home summer schooling on my brother will not help. That made my dad shut down, and he went to drink alone in the living room. My mom has apologized to me repeatedly over her past actions. She says she blames herself because it was her idea to coddle my brother so much, and my dad just went along with it. She told me that back then she was never thinking ahead to what my brother would be like as an adult. She basically refused to admit he was going to grow up, so she just kept spoiling him to try and keep him her baby. My parents have scheduled couples counseling, but it's going to be a while before they get in due to the wait period. My dad is pretty obviously not looking forward to it. It's harder to make him admit wrongdoing than my mom. He caved and admitted how much he'd screwed up during the family intervention, but since then he's tried to act like he's just a normal parent. But I've made it clear that pretending that shit didn't happen won't make it go away, and my mom agrees with me. So that's where things are right now. Hopefully, my next update will be better. Update 5. This is not an update I was hoping for. My mom was secretly letting my brother have other privileges back while my dad was at work because he kept begging her. Why? Because he's special. My dad was holding to keeping my brother accountable, but my mom just couldn't do it and started letting my brother have his way again behind everyone's backs. And my brother kept demanding more and more from her once she started giving him what he wanted again. My mom bought a used Switch with a copy of Zelda bought and let my brother play it in secret, and was letting him online with his laptop that was supposed to have been taken away unless needed for school work. My brother demanded mom replace some of the things they sold and called her some horrible things when she said she couldn't because dad would notice. This repeated over the course of several days, and my brother started to get violent, and mom finally hit her breaking point. She outright slapped my brother across the face as hard as she could and then had a complete mental breakdown where she resorted to self-harm. She ended up calling my dad to come home early because she kept hurting herself. He rushed home and found my mom literally beating herself, and he had to make her stop. She's never done anything like this before. My brother was in total shock and freaking out about it. My dad blamed my brother and whooped his ass raw. He'd spanked me a few times when I was a kid, but I heard from dad later that he'd really wailed on my brother while calling him an ungrateful brat they did everything for. Then he took away the Switch my mom had been hiding for him. My mom had to be taken into the ER and then had to be held for a psych evaluation. She was found to be so heavily stressed that her anxiety was through the roof and had to be hospitalized. I saw a picture of my mom that my dad had taken before she was taken in for the psych hold. She had 2 black eyes, her face was swollen, and she'd ripped some of her own hair out. My dad implied she'd done more to herself, but I didn't see. However, my dad begged me to come over and watch my brother while they were away because he was afraid my brother might do something insane too after everything that happened. When I showed up, I found my brother huddled in his closet and crying. He wouldn't say much to me other than small apologies, and he jolted if I even so much as touched him. I ordered his favorite pizza on my dime and had it delivered. It's barbecue chicken with stuffed crust. It coaxed him out of his room, and we ate dinner in awkward silence. I played Mario Kart on the N64 with him for a while after that, and he eventually broke down sobbing. He asked me how bad of a person he really was. I hesitated in saying anything at first, but I told him. I said it wasn't his fault for being raised spoiled because that was on our parents, but he is getting older and can't put all the blame on our parents anymore. I said he himself was entitled, violent, blames others for all of his faults, steals from people, and was in need of some serious counseling. My brother cried some more and asked me to leave the room. About an hour went by before he came out, and we talked in the living room. My brother asked me what it was like being an adult, so I told him about the responsibilities I have in working a job, paying for gas, rent, utilities, etc., and how much I usually had left over each month for anything else. He was pretty shocked because no one had ever explained adult life to him like this, and I remarked that he'll be there soon enough in a few short years. My brother said he wished he didn't have to be an adult. He likes having his way and gaming all he wants, but then admitted that he knew I was going to say that was wrong, which I nodded and said he was correct. I remarked to him about how little I got compared to him growing up because he had to have everything, which is why I took lemons and made lemonade any way I could. Like how I hid my money at my aunt's house and how I was afraid to keep nice things because he always wanted to take them away from me. This heart-to-heart lasted until we saw Dad pull his car in. My brother bolted back to his room before Dad came in the house. When I saw my dad, he really didn't look so good. He looked like he'd been crying and was a complete mess. He apologized to me in tears and said he's finally truly starting to understand how awful of a parent he truly is and couldn't believe he was blind to it for so long. We hugged. He cried some more. Then he spilled his guts to me about everything that happened. I've never seen him cry so much. It's been well over a week now and nearing 2, and thus far my mom hasn't returned home yet. I'd hoped that if I waited this long to post about it, my mom would have come back, but wherever she is right now, she's still there. My dad won't say anything more about what's going on, but I think my mom might have been labeled a danger to herself and has been institutionalized. Otherwise, I think she would have been home by now. My brother has calmed down a lot, and he does the chores Dad gives him without complaint. Dad also gave him back the Switch Mom had bought for him and said not to F things up this time because if he wants all of his privileges back, he was going to earn them one by one. Yesterday, I talked with my brother over the phone while Dad was still at work, and he says he's afraid of Dad now but also said that Dad hasn't even so much as raised his voice to him since the day Mom went mad. He admitted that he still wished things could go back to how they used to be. He misses all his electronics, his games, and his bike. I asked Dad about the bike, and he said he'll get him another one in time, but for now, he's just too worried about Mom to even think about that kind of stuff. I'm kind of at a loss about how to move forward here. Obviously, I know that my family is messed up and needs support in a variety of ways. I am starting to feel sorry for my brother, but at the same time, I know that he needs this lesson to move forward in life. But I did not agree with Dad spanking him the way he did. I haven't said that to him, nor do I think I ever will unless he does it again, which I'm not so sure he will since he regrets it immensely. And my brother is starting to understand how to behave. But I still feel really mixed up over a lot of this. I knew getting my family changed for the better would be dramatic, but I didn't think it would be at this level. My wife friend-zoned me and wants a platonic relationship. My wife, 35 female, and I, 35 male, have been married for 15 years and we've been together for 20 years. We have 2 kids, 12 and 14, whom we absolutely adore and work tirelessly to provide the best possible life for. For the past 3 years, things have been somewhat bumpy. I understand that our kids are at an age where they require a ton of our attention and resources with school band, club sports, and other extracurriculars, and I'm aware of the physical and emotional toll that can have on marriages. However, for these past 3 years, my wife and I have had very little intimacy and very little physical closeness, and we've been trying very hard to work on that aspect of our relationship. This past year has been the most difficult and by far the darkest year in our marriage. We didn't talk very much. We essentially became roommates, co-parenting our kids under the same roof. It was very depressing and very demoralizing. It was to the point where we began contemplating divorce, and it became very dark and gloomy in the household because of that. We began seeking help with both individualized therapy and couples therapy, and it seems to have helped some. Little by little, we started to get along and started to have deeper conversations about what our marriage looks like and what we would love for it to look like. This is where it gets tough. As time passed, my wife started to tell me that she was no longer in love with me and that she only saw me as a best friend, that she loved me in a very platonic way, and this was one of the main reasons she didn't have any desire for intimacy and let alone physical closeness. This was very shocking to me, and quite frankly, I was devastated. I became angry and depressed, and I couldn't fathom the thought that I was no longer wanted or desired by the person I fell completely in love with. Things began to deteriorate again, and not long after, we were back to square one. I sat down with her one afternoon and had a heart-to-heart and began to ask questions about where the root of this problem lies, and her answer was, "I don't know, and that I've built up resentment towards you, but I don't know where it stems from." As you can imagine, This provides very little to no insight into how to approach this. I'm puzzled, I'm frustrated, and I do not know what to do at this point. Currently, we've arrived at a place where she says that she has no desire for intimacy and no desire for physical closeness or connection. She says that all she wants is simply companionship, which basically means our co-parenting roommate dynamic. I asked her what I could possibly do or what it is about me that is so unattractive or undesirable, and her response is always, I don't know. She stated that she does love me, but it's not the same, that she's been feeling disconnected for years, that our marriage just takes up too much work, her focus is only the children for now, and that my co-parenting contributions are meaningful to her in our home. I'm at a loss and I'm mainly venting about my frustration. It's tough to realize that the person you love has no feelings for you. I feel like at this point, I'm only here to contribute financially and as a parent. I feel like what she means with companionship is that she's comfortable with the convenience of having a good father for our kids and financial contribution to the household. In regard to intimacy and or physical closeness, she basically told me that it's not something she's interested in or wants at this time. She mentioned that the only way to get to a point of any of that is to be intoxicated, which I believe is incredibly awful and very wrong. I told her I do not think forcing herself to have physical closeness or be intimate by drinking or smoking is good, and I declined to be a part of that, which, to my surprise, upset her and made her more distant. We're both extremely honest and transparent. We've never cheated on each other, and we are always free to look through each other's phones, emails, socials, etc., and we hardly ever do. I asked her if there was someone else, and she declined. Honestly, I believe her. We then peacefully went through each other's things, and as expected, it was clean. We've always been very forward, even with a hard topic, so I don't smell nor feel any foul play or infidelity. Am I wrong for declining to be only intimate or have physical closeness when she's intoxicated? I'm firm on my stance and have not partaken in this only when I'm high or drunk intimacy because it doesn't sit well with me. I do not know how to help our situation, and I'm starting to become a bit anxious and desperate. We're both fairly young and healthy individuals and good looking. We both have good standing careers and are good parents. I'm just not sure how our lives could have driven us to this point. I'd love some outside perspective on this matter and some insight on how to address something like this. It feels so awful to be unwanted and undesired by my own spouse. I hate it. Story 1 update. I wanted to give you guys an update on how the therapy session with my wife went this week. Not sure if this is helpful or not, but I took many of the responses, comments, and suggestions from my initial post and put together some things I wanted to discuss with our couples therapist to help us navigate some of the core issues that may be affecting this situation. One of the main things that is the buzzword of this has been the term resentment and been really eating me up inside, knowing my wife keeps telling me that she doesn't know why she's resentful or doesn't know why this is affecting her emotionally or mentally. I brought this up with our therapist once again and resurfaced the conversation about being married for so long, 15 years, and being together since we were 14 years old. A long history of growing up and having children when she was 19 years old and I was 20 significantly changed the trajectory of our lives. We experienced severe poverty and many hardships in the process. We essentially had zero social life for the past 10 years because we were so busy raising babies, 2 kids now ages 12 and 14. She followed up with tons of questions directed mostly at my wife about her feelings towards this, and 90% of the responses were very kid-focused. It definitely felt like she was afraid of saying, yes, it sucked, because she would feel guilt or shame because it would imply she regrets the kids. I mentioned this in the session, and the therapist encouraged her to look outside of the lens of being a mother and try to view it a bit more selfishly and individually. It was very eye-opening. My wife mentioned that she was very frustrated with the fact that we did miss out on many things in life. She was also very clear in saying, I do not think I missed out on other partners or dating or partying, but I certainly lost all my friends. This was huge because one of the big pieces that caused a strain in our lives was how siloed and isolated we've been, again busy raising kids. I followed up by reminding her that it's important to have good friends and to make time for herself and her friendships. For the past 3+ years, we've had multiple conversations about friends and how it is important to have them in life, especially when you have similar peers that can help in many areas of life that perhaps we have no experience navigating and even simply for enjoyment. It has been something my wife avoids, even though she's always been someone who needs that external stimulus. The main reason for her not investing in friends or even herself has always been the kids. Like I mentioned earlier in this post, 90% of the answers have to relate to the kids to some degree. At this point in our session, I started to feel like there was a common denominator: the kids in most of the frustrations and problems she was experiencing. I simply asked her, do you think you may be upset at me because I'm responsible for these kids in the sense that I got you pregnant so young? I wasn't ready, but she said that she was upset at me for that. She also followed up with the fact that she knows that's unreasonable because it takes 2 to tango. I did feel like it progressed because it kind of gave us something to work on and help alleviate some of these burdens. So we agreed to invest more time in nurturing good friendships, both together and individually. Towards the end of the session, we began to discuss what actionable items we would take from this session. At this point, it was still very ambiguous and blurry as to what the outcomes were. I was very direct and very forward in asking my wife what a plan moving forward would look like. I decided prior to the session that should my wife say the same thing about being co-parenting roommates, I would take the 180 approach and essentially do me. She started basically saying the same thing, that she doesn't have any desire to be intimate or physical with me as of now, that she loves me immensely, and she feels bad for not being there for me. As mentioned in my first post, I also brought up brief swinging that happened, to which, for the 50th time, she said it wasn't a problem. I agree with her on this. This was a somewhat mechanical approach for a solution to a problem that was very much in existence when we tried this. We both really have no issue with this. We know it happened, we tried it, and mutually stopped and turned the page. I also brought up other life events that may cause resentment, and really, we ended up not getting anywhere else as far as the root for resentment, which was discouraging. I then basically expressed to my wife that I would not be okay with that arrangement. I told her that I've really done everything I can and that this issue really has reached a point where it has nothing to do with me or require me to do anything that I'm currently not doing. I was very direct in saying that I will not be accepting this dynamic and that I need to be with someone who is actively involved in our marriage, works towards resolutions, and maintains an active intimacy and physical relationship. I expressed how I'm not going to be a convenience and that there is more to life than being roommates and co-parents. I made sure she knows I love her dearly and I do want this to work for the better. I also told her that I'm fully committed to this marriage as long as she is as well, and that if she wasn't, it's okay. However, I will not be part of something where these efforts are not reciprocated. I told her I have no plans of leaving and I do not want a divorce. However, I made it clear that if this dynamic continues, divorce will be the only outcome. Of course, there were tears involved, and it was a very bleak and sad ending to the session. Still, nothing was said, and I walked out very discouraged and very determined to start working on the 180 as soon as we left the room. It's painful and very difficult because much of the 180 requires you to be very short and cold and transactional. The saddest part is realizing this dynamic already is very cold and transactional. Here is where it gets very interesting. I started working on implementing many of the 180 recommendations that same day. I mentioned to my wife that, hey, things are going to be a bit different moving forward. I'm going to honor her roommate and co-parent dynamic without reproach and that it should be no mistake that I'm not happy here and I'm never going to be okay with it. I'm done working on it if she wasn't going to work on it. She agreed and went to bed. I started to build distance and started to basically focus on myself, very short and transactional. She asked for help on some of her personal things, to which I declined, and it really shocked her. She was upset, saying I was being petulant. I explained to her that she is now fully in charge of her own life and her own issues. We didn't talk all day and we only spoke when necessary. A few days, I keep this going and she's very visibly upset and stressed. I typically react to that with gestures of help or nurturing, but I didn't this time. That night she was crying, telling me she's stressed and she thinks something is wrong with me because I'm indifferent. I simply listened and told her that this is the dynamic she proposed, and I'm simply, much like her, taking care of myself and focusing on myself. I'm not going to lie, it's been very hard to be cold and distant because, as I mentioned before, I love her and I wish I could hold her and love on her. However, I know this is somewhat manipulative in a way just to get away and still keep me in the friend zone. So I've been staying the course. We're now going on a week of this 180, and let's just say there have been many changes on her side. I think she's starting to realize that there is more to me than just friends and co-parenting. I sent her a text a few days ago essentially itemizing bills and separating the financial responsibilities 50-50, and she lost her mind. She basically told me it was out of left field, to which I responded, hey, friends go 50-50, and as your friend, I expect nothing less. This was very eye-opening because it gave me a glimpse of how I'm really being taken for granted and how a level of comfort and convenience at my expense has really been overlooked. I pushed through anyway and basically told her that this is the new dynamic she asked for, and that it's still a bargain because she would still have 100% if she was on her own. I'll wrap up with this. While the 180 has been working in many different areas, I'm still very much sad about the overall situation. There have been many eye-opening statements being said and realizations that have not been pleasant to encounter. It has also sparked new energy and new efforts on her side as well. She's definitely seeking to talk to me more often, and while it's hard to turn down, I hope if things improve, this continues to happen. I've also noticed that she's making more time for herself aside from being a mom, which is huge because she pretty much neglected herself for years. I'm very pleased seeing her be more herself. My hope is that as we work on ourselves, the marriage improves. There really is no telling at this point where this will go. We are very much cordial and amicable even to this day, and that's a very good sign. Boundaries are set, and expectations are very clear, and I feel that no matter the outcome, I'll be at peace with everything that has been done. We're still going to continue the couples therapy until we either rekindle our marriage or end up in divorce. I feel like having this non-biased third party really helps as a witness and a guide through this. No matter what, I will always love my wife. However, I will not participate in an intimacy-less, physical closeness-less marriage because we both deserve better. Thank you all for the kind words and recommendations and feedback. This will be my last post on this topic, and I wish you all the best. My parents never wanted me, but I left and started my own business. However, my parents wanted to steal my money and sue me. They were never fond of me. They were high school sweethearts and even attended the same college. They had grand plans to travel the globe and immerse themselves in different cultures, but all those dreams were dashed when my mother discovered she was pregnant while still in college. They considered terminating the pregnancy, but their parents didn't allow it. Eventually, my mother had to drop out of college and stay with her parents because she couldn't handle the gossip and judgment from others. That's how I came into the world. My mother despised me, but my grandparents adored me. For a long time, I believed my mother was my sister and my grandparents were my parents because she never spent time with me. She would either ignore me or yell at me if I sought her attention. My father was also absent, so I had no idea he even existed. My parents continued dating during this time. I understand they didn't want a child, but as a child myself, I couldn't grasp why they hated me. My grandparents on both sides would spend time with me, babysit me, and treat me kindly. By the time my father graduated from college, I had started to walk and talk. He began feeling guilty for not being involved in my life, so he started visiting me every weekend. I thought he was just a friend of my grandparents. My mother hated seeing him spend time with me and always told him to ignore me, but my grandparents encouraged him to get to know me, and that's how I discovered he was my father. Once he got a job, he proposed to my mother, and they moved in together. My father wanted me to move in with them so they could take care of me, but my mother was adamantly against it. My grandparents were aging and wanted my parents to take responsibility for their actions. Reluctantly, my parents took me in, and at the age of 5, I moved in with them. Saying I hated living with my parents would be an understatement. It was like the light in my life was replaced by darkness. My mother constantly reminded me to be grateful for staying with them and threatened to kick me out if I did something wrong. My father worked all day and came home late at night. When I wanted to spend time with him, he would tell me he needed some time alone and urged me to go to bed, saying he couldn't handle me that day. I went from living with my loving grandparents to living with parents who despised me. I didn't understand why, but I knew I was unwanted. My parents never bought me toys or treats like other kids. Sometimes I went to school with incomplete assignments, and when my teacher called my mother, she would scream at me for being lazy and tell me to take responsibility for my studies. I was so terrified of her that I started doing my homework diligently, hoping she would accept me someday, but she never did. My father didn't care about my daily activities or school performance and continued living in his own world. As I grew older, I began to understand how my parents truly felt about me. I noticed how differently my parents treated me compared to other kids. I watched as other parents dropped off their children, hugging, kissing, and smiling at them. I never experienced any of that. It was as if I lived with strangers. This made me question whether I was truly my parents' biological child. Whenever I visited my grandparents, I asked them, and they assured me that I was indeed my parents' child and explained that my parents just needed time to mature. Meanwhile, my mother never missed an opportunity to say hurtful things. She mocked my hair, glasses, and weight and would say things like if she had been in high school with me, she would have bullied me mercilessly. It was bizarre to hear such things from my own mother. I was allergic to milk, something my grandparents knew well, but my mother refused to accept it. One day, she forced me to drink milk, claiming I was faking my allergy to be cool and that kids in her time never had allergies. This resulted in a severe allergic reaction, and I ended up in the hospital. The incident shook her, especially when the police came to talk to her. After that, she learned her lesson and never gave me milk again. My dad also yelled at her, and she cried. My grandparents rushed to the hospital to be with me, and there was a lot of discussion while I was recovering. After this incident, my parents' attitude toward me softened. My mother started waking me up for school and helping me get ready, and my dad would spend time with me in the evening and tuck me into bed. I don't know what changed, but they began treating me like a human being. It was strange but pleasant to see my mom asking about school or my dad inviting me to watch football games with him. This is how I began to get to know my parents better. I think I was born with a lot of empathy because I didn't hold any resentment toward them. The three of us would sometimes go to the beach on weekends, which remains one of my favorite memories. I was no longer jealous of the kids in my class because my parents started to show me some love. When I turned 15, I discovered a talent for crocheting, a skill my grandmother, my mom's mother, had taught me. By this time, my grandfather had passed away, and my grandmother would crochet and sell her beautiful handmade creations at the local craft fair each year to earn a few hundred. The intricate patterns and vibrant colors she used fascinated me, and I eagerly absorbed every detail of her craft. As I spent more time honing my crocheting skills under her guidance, a deep passion for creating unique and personalized items blossomed within me. Inspired by my grandmother's entrepreneurial spirit, I decided to try selling my own crochet creations. With her encouragement, I set up a small booth at the same local craft fair where she showcased her work. The response was overwhelming, and I quickly realized that my passion could also be a source of income. Word spread about my talent, and soon I was taking custom orders from classmates, friends, and even people in the community. Each piece I crafted told a story, and customers were drawn to the idea of owning something handmade and unique. As my small business grew, so did my skills and creativity. I began experimenting with different yarn textures, colors, and patterns, pushing the boundaries of traditional crochet. My creations evolved from simple scarves and blankets to intricate wearables and home decor items. The positive feedback and repeat customers fueled my determination to refine my craft further. When I started earning significant money, my grandmother suggested I open a savings account to manage my finances better. She suggested saving my earnings for college. When I shared this with my parents, their eyes widened in shock upon hearing how much I had been earning. Until then, they thought crocheting was just a silly hobby. When they realized I was making a significant amount of money for my age, they vehemently opposed it. My dad threatened to burn all my crochet pieces and insisted he wasn't working hard to pay for my education so I could waste time on stupid things. My mother banned me from visiting my grandmother's house. They demanded that I hand over the money I had earned. But when I told them it was all with my grandmother, they called her and started yelling. When my grandmother realized they were trying to take my money, she refused to give them anything while my parents screamed about how they deserved every cent. This made me realize my parents hadn't changed over the years. They were still as selfish and self-serving as ever. I couldn't give up my passion for crocheting, and I wasn't about to lose out on earning money that could potentially fund my college education. Seeing how my parents behaved, there was a good chance they might not even send me to college, so I needed to take matters into my own hands and work towards my future. I devised a plan to visit my grandmother's house every weekend to work on my designs. I lied to my parents, telling them I was spending time and sleeping over at my best friend's house, who knew about the situation and supported me. I would then go to my grandmother's place, and we would crochet together to fulfill the pouring orders from clients. My grandmother played a pivotal role in building my business, and I also embraced different online platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook to reach a broader audience. Social media became a powerful tool for showcasing my work and connecting with fellow artisans. The digital realm opened up endless possibilities, allowing me to share my passion with a global community. Over the years, my small booth at the local craft fair transformed into a thriving online business. My grandmother helped me open a bank account with her as a co-owner. I trusted her completely, and thanks to her, I could save all my earnings for college. She believed in me when my own parents only wanted to take my money for themselves. Once, my mother went through my phone without my knowledge and discovered my online business and that I was still operating it behind their backs. This led to a huge fight with my parents, screaming at both me and my grandmother. They demanded I withdraw all the money I had earned and give it to them since they claimed they had raised and taken care of me all my life. I was on the verge of tears, trying to explain that the money was for my college and that I wasn't harming anyone. My dad yelled that I had gone behind their backs and that he could no longer trust me. My mother demanded I delete my Instagram page and stood right next to me to ensure I did it. I cleverly deactivated my account instead, planning to reactivate it once I was free from my parents. They then implemented strict phone restrictions from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. and 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. They also started tracking my location and monitoring my entire internet history with notifications triggered if I searched for anything they deemed inappropriate, even innocuous things like shopping for underwear. I was only allowed to go out with my friends twice a week, but I had to come straight home afterward, or they would call me and my friends multiple times. Occasionally, I was allowed to hang out with my grandma for a few hours after school, but they banned me from crocheting with her. Otherwise, they threatened to take away my phone and internet access. There were many days when I just wanted to run away, but I was still 16 and had no way out. I asked my parents to let me have a part-time job at a local cafe, which they allowed but demanded 25% of my earnings. I agreed without argument, giving them 25% every week and the remaining 75% to my grandma to deposit into my bank account. My parents continued to make my life difficult by regularly barging into my room at odd times to check my space, go through my chats and emails, and monitor my location. If I didn't follow their rules, I was either grounded or forced to give them more of my earnings that week. Despite everything, I focused on excelling at school and getting good grades. I knew that getting into a good college was my ticket to escaping this life, so I worked tirelessly. The night before I turned 17, I packed everything I had bought for myself, leaving behind items my parents had given me, including my phone. I wiped my phone clean to ensure they couldn't find any information about me. I also knew my parents wouldn't allow me to take anything they had bought, so I didn't. My plan was set. My grandma came to pick me up early in the morning so I could finally move in with her. My parents were shocked to see me leaving and started arguing with my grandma, threatening to involve the police. I told them to go ahead since I was now 17 and could make my own decisions. They tried to blackmail me, saying they would tell everyone I was an ungrateful daughter and that everyone would shun me for leaving my parents. I didn't care. They also threatened to withdraw any support for college, but I smiled, knowing I had saved enough and was eligible for a scholarship. As I walked out of the house, I felt a mix of fear, relief, and determination. Little did I know, my journey was about to take an unexpected turn. The first few weeks at my grandma's place were a breath of fresh air. The strict restrictions were lifted, and I could finally breathe without constant monitoring. The first thing I did was buy a new phone and get a new mobile number. Next, I went to the bank with my grandma and took all my relevant documents to convert my minor account into an individual account. I was thrilled to finally have my own card and account without needing anyone's permission. I reactivated my Instagram account to resume my crocheting business. My grandma was very supportive and even offered me a small space in her house to set up a makeshift studio. Just a week after moving out, I heard from relatives and old neighbors that my parents had thrown a party to celebrate their newfound independence. They were extremely happy to start their new family life free from the burden of having me around. They invited other child-free friends and posted numerous pictures of themselves laughing and drinking throughout the night without a care in the world. Initially, the news stung. The fact that my own parents were celebrating my absence just a week after I left them, showcasing their newfound freedom, was a stark reminder of how unwanted I had been in their lives. It felt like a cruel twist of fate. My dad's parents were also shocked to hear about the celebration and they tried to reach out to me. They had been traveling a lot in their RV, exploring the country, so it had been years since I had spoken with them. When they finally got my new number from one of my cousins, they immediately called me to ask about everything. I told them the truth about what had happened between me and my parents and how I had left home. They were horrified to hear about the abuse. They asked why I hadn't reached out to them for help, and I explained how my parents monitored my phone, restricting my communication to only a few friends and my grandma. This is when my dad's parents revealed that my parents never wanted me in the first place, but they had thought my parents had changed over the years after I moved in with them. They begged me to forgive them for not being there for me. They also spoke with my grandma, who told them about the various fights she had with my parents to protect me. After this, my dad's parents took it upon themselves to inform every family member about what my parents had put me through. Slowly, the news spread through my relatives and family friends, and everyone started calling me and offering their support. I was surprised to see how sympathetic everyone was to my plight. Some even offered me monetary help, but I refused, telling them about my crocheting business and how they could help by spreading the word so I could get more clients. This is how my business started to slowly pick up. During this time, I was accepted into my dream college with a full scholarship. My life was finally about to change for the better. The college was not very far from my grandma's place, so I could visit her every weekend to spend time with her or work on my crocheting. My dad's parents decided to gift me their old car, which needed some repairs but was manageable, making it easier for me to visit my grandma. One of my friends who worked for a local newspaper reached out to me and asked if she could write a story about me. There weren't many young entrepreneurs in our area who had their own businesses like mine, and she thought my story could inspire other youngsters to find their own path. After some consideration, I agreed to the interview. I didn't think it was a big deal since my business still needed a lot of work, but I hoped that if there was a kid out there like me stuck in a toxic environment, they would read my story and feel inspired. When my story came out, it felt surreal to see my own journey featured in the paper. It might have been a small achievement, but for the first time in a very long time, I felt proud of the hard work I had put into my business despite all the difficulties. My grandma was extremely proud of me, and other relatives and friends started reaching out to congratulate me on this success. This was a new feeling, as my parents had never supported or complimented me on my hard work growing up. My parents must have read the story as well because they called my grandma to scream at her, accusing me of betraying them by going behind their backs. They demanded that I publicly give them credit for my business since relatives had been criticizing them ever since they learned about their controlling behavior. They also insisted that I share my profits with them, threatening to take me to court. But my grandma firmly told them that I had done all the business under her roof, so they could try going to court over it if they wanted because they would lose. I was so angry at how my parents were behaving that I wanted to scream and yell at them, but I knew I couldn't do that. Instead, I organized a small celebration and invited my close family members and friends so we could celebrate the success of my hard work and business. Since I was going away to college, I felt like I deserved one last hurrah with people who genuinely loved me. We had a great time throughout the night. Of course, word spread to my parents, and somehow they got hold of my new number. They started texting me about how I was just an ungrateful daughter and how they wished they never had me. My dad even sent a long text about how he had spent his life providing for me, yet here I was wasting my money by celebrating with others. Was I in the wrong for having a party to celebrate with my loved ones when my parents also had a celebration after I moved out? Update 1. When I posted my story on Reddit, I had no idea it would blow up in just a few days. I have seen my story on TikTok, and it scares me that my parents might find out about this. For my sake, please pray that they don't find out anything. As per the comments, I understand that many people want me to block my parents permanently, and I plan on doing exactly that. However, I do want to send them a final email telling them about everything they have put me through so they know exactly what I have been experiencing. I am not a doormat, as some of you have been calling me. I am just a young person who had extremely toxic parents, and it's difficult for me to drop them. Society always teaches us that our parents always want the best for us, but no one ever teaches us what to do when you end up with toxic parents and how to cut them off. I understand if some of you blame me for letting my parents walk all over me, but please understand that I am young and learning slowly to stand up for myself. Update 2. Hi everyone. Thank you to those who have reached out to me with supportive messages and shared similar situations they have gone through. As I mentioned earlier, I did write an email to my parents. My grandma helped me pen down my thoughts more clearly. Here is the content of the email. Dear Mom and Dad, I've spent a considerable amount of time reflecting on our past, present, and the potential future of our relationship. It's with a heavy heart that I've come to the realization that for my own well-being and growth, I need to sever ties with you both. I have spent my entire childhood yearning for your love and attempting to meet your expectations, but for some reason, I was never enough. Over the years, I've worked tirelessly to understand the reasons behind your apparent dislike for me and to strive to be accepted into your lives, but you both never accepted me. From the earliest memories when Mom forced me to drink milk despite my allergies to the times I felt like a stranger in my own home, your actions have shaped my perception of how toxic our family is. Yet through it all, I held on, hoping for a change, for a connection that never happened. Unfortunately, when I found solace and purpose in crocheting, thanks to Grandma's guidance, I thought it might bridge the gap between us. As I built my business, your attempts to undermine and control me only solidified my decision to break free from this toxic environment. Your insistence on claiming a share of my hard-earned money, threatening legal action, and attempting to control my celebrations only further highlight how toxic you all are for me. I want you to understand that this decision is not an act of revenge or an attempt to hurt you. It's an expression of self-preservation, a step toward building a life that is free from toxicity and filled with the love and support that every child deserves. I harbor no ill will toward either of you, but I need to prioritize my mental and emotional well-being. Thank you both for pushing me to become independent and for underestimating the potential within me. I wish you both the best in your future endeavors and hope you find happiness without me. I request that you respect my decision to have no further contact. Let us part ways amicably. I won't lie, I had tears while writing this email to my parents. I know I should be strong and remember all the bad things they have done to me, but it's so hard to cut off your parents. As children, we are conditioned to love them, and it's difficult to break free from that mindset. After sending the email, I blocked them everywhere. In a few days, I will be heading off to college, and I'm a bit nervous about it. My grandma and my dad's parents are going to help me move into my new dormitory. I'm excited about meeting new people and making new friends. To everyone asking, my crocheting business is doing well, and I won't quit it despite being in college. I love making unique designs, and this is my passion, so I will work hard to manage it alongside my studies. This is the only update I have for now. Update 3. Wow, it's been 6 months since my last update. I can't believe how much time has passed and how different my life is now. First and foremost, I am thriving in college. The classes are challenging, but I'm putting in the effort to maintain good grades. I know that despite my successful crocheting business, having a college degree will provide a safety net. I've also made some incredible friends in college, and thanks to them, I even get more crochet orders. College life has allowed me to explore new horizons and meet different people. It's a refreshing change from the isolation I felt back home. I even have a boyfriend now named Kyle. It's only been 2 months since we started dating, and we're still getting to know each other. He's a sweet guy, so we'll see how things go. Every weekend, I make it a point to visit my grandma. We continue to work from her makeshift studio to fill our crochet orders. The business is booming, and the positive response from our clients is overwhelming. It's amazing how pursuing my passion has provided not only financial stability but also a sense of purpose and fulfillment. As for my parents, it's been a quiet 6 months since my heartfelt email. They haven't attempted to contact me. My grandparents informed me that my parents received a lot of criticism from everyone, so they decided to sell everything and move out of the country, likely seeking a fresh start. I don't know where they are, and truth be told, I don't really care. The fact that they chose to leave without any attempt at reconciliation or even a single apology speaks volumes. I genuinely hope they find happiness wherever they have gone and can pursue the things they have always wanted to do. It's time for me to focus on my own journey and continue building the life I have always dreamed of. I want to express my gratitude to all of you who have been following my story and offering words of encouragement. Your support has meant the world to me. If there's one lesson I have learned through all of this, it's the importance of surrounding yourself with people who uplift and believe in you. Thanks to my grandma and friends who believed in me, I am where I am today. This will probably be my last update. Thank you, everyone. My sister started her business by stealing my inheritance money, but karma hit her, and the business went sideways.
I, a 28-year-old man, lost my dad last year to a sudden heart attack.
It's been tough, especially dealing with the consequences involving my stepmom, Karen, 45F, and stepbrother, Tyler, 15 meters. Dad and I were close, but things were always tense with Karen. Dad was well off and owned 2 houses, our family home in the suburbs and a beautiful vacation house by Lake Tahoe. In his will, he left the family home to Karen and the lake house to me. The lake house was special to us because we spent every summer there fishing, boating, and making memories when I was a kid. Here's where it gets messy. A week after the funeral, I drove up to the lake house, needing some alone time to grieve. When I got there, I found Karen and my stepbrother Tyler had moved in. They claimed Dad had verbally promised them the lake house, and they weren't budging. I was shocked. I showed them the will, but Karen just scoffed and said she needed the house more than me since she was now a single mom. She accused me of being selfish and insisted that Dad would have wanted them to have it. I tried reasoning with her, explaining how much the place meant to me, but it quickly turned into a shouting match. Karen called me ungrateful and said I never accepted her as family. I'll admit, I lost my cool and said some things I'm not proud of. I brought up how she always seemed more interested in Dad's money than in being a real part of our family. It got ugly, and I ended up storming out, feeling betrayed and furious. I immediately called a lawyer who confirmed that legally the house was mine. He advised me to start eviction proceedings. I sent Karen an official notice to vacate, but she tore it up and sent me a photo of the shredded paper. Now, my extended family is involved. My dad's sister, Aunt Linda, is on my side, saying I'm just claiming what's rightfully mine. But my dad's brother, Uncle Rob, thinks I'm being cruel to a widow and teenager who just lost their husband/father. Karen's been telling everyone that I'm trying to make them homeless, conveniently leaving out the part about them having the family home. I feel like I'm going crazy. Am I the bad guy for wanting the house my dad left me? Should I just let them have it to keep the peace? I don't want to hurt Tyler, but I also don't want to give up my inheritance and the place that holds so many memories of my dad. Edit. Thanks for all the responses. To clarify some points, I have my own apartment in the city, so I'm not homeless. Karen and Tyler have the family home to live in. The lake house was meant to be a vacation home. There's no written evidence of Dad verbally promising them the lake house. It's just their word against the official will. Update 1. It's been a month since my original post, and things have gone from bad to worse. I wanted to give you all an update on this ongoing nightmare. After talking with my lawyer, I decided to move forward with the eviction process. I sent Karen a formal eviction notice, giving her 30 days to vacate the property. She responded by hiring her own hotshot lawyer and challenging the will in court. Her lawyer is arguing that my dad made verbal promises to Karen about the lake house and that the will doesn't reflect his true final wishes. It's infuriating because I know it's not true, but it's her word against a dead man's. They're trying to paint a picture of my dad as someone who would go back on his word to his son, and it's killing me to see his memory treated this way. The court case is dragging on, and it's bleeding me dry. I'm burning through my savings on legal fees faster than I ever thought possible. Meanwhile, Karen and Tyler are still living it up in the lake house, refusing to budge until the court makes a decision. The family drama has exploded. My aunts and uncles are taking sides, and it's tearing everyone apart. Aunt Linda is firmly in my corner, even offering to help with my legal fees. Uncle Rob, on the other hand, is fully supporting Karen. He's always had a soft spot for her, and I'm starting to wonder if there's more to their relationship than I realized. My cousins are caught in the crossfire, not knowing whose side to take. Family gatherings have become a minefield of tension and passive-aggressive comments. Last Sunday's dinner ended with Aunt Linda throwing a glass of wine in Uncle Rob's face after he called me a heartless money grubber. In the midst of all this, Tyler reached out to me privately. He sent me a long text saying he feels trapped in the middle of this war. He told me he misses the times when we used to get along and wishes everyone could just talk it out. I feel bad for him, I really do, but I can't shake the feeling that Karen might be using him to play on my emotions. I'm starting to doubt everything. Am I being too harsh? Should I just let them have the house to end this nightmare? But then I look at the photos of Dad and me at the lake, and I feel a renewed sense of determination. This isn't just about a house, it's about honoring my dad's wishes and preserving the memories we shared. The stress is taking a toll on every aspect of my life. I've had to take time off work to deal with all the legal meetings and court appearances. My girlfriend, Sarah, is getting frustrated with how consumed I am by this situation. We had a big fight last night when I missed our anniversary dinner because I was on the phone with my lawyer. I'm tired, I'm stressed, and I feel like I'm losing myself in this battle. But I'm also determined to see it through. I know Dad would have wanted me to stand up for myself. I'll update again when there are new developments. Hopefully, the next update will bring some resolution to this mess. Update 2. It's been 3 months since my last update, and the situation has taken some wild and unexpected turns. Buckle up because this is going to be a roller coaster. The court case was moving at a snail's pace, with both sides presenting arguments and evidence. My lawyer was confident we had a strong case based on the clear language in the will. Karen's lawyer kept pushing the verbal agreement angle, but they didn't have any concrete proof. Then, out of nowhere, Karen's lawyer approached us with a settlement offer. They proposed that Karen and Tyler would move out of the lake house, but in turn, I would have to pay them a hefty sum as a relocation fee. I was conflicted. On one hand, it would end the legal battle and get them out of the house. On the other hand, it felt like I was being extorted. Why should I pay them to leave a house that was rightfully mine? After much discussion with my lawyer and Aunt Linda, I decided to counter with a lower offer. We went back and forth for weeks, finally agreeing on a sum that was still substantial but wouldn't completely drain my bank account. Just when I thought it was over, Karen pulled her next trick. She went to the local media with her side of the story. A small Lake Tahoe newspaper ran a front-page article painting me as a heartless stepson kicking out a grieving widow and her son. They conveniently left out the part about the family home and the settlement money. The article spread like wildfire. Suddenly, I was getting angry messages from strangers on social media. People I went to high school with were sharing the article, calling me all sorts of names. Even some distant relatives who hadn't bothered to reach out during this whole ordeal suddenly had strong opinions about what a terrible person I was. I felt like I was losing control of the narrative. I considered giving my own interview to tell my side, but my lawyer advised against it. He said engaging with the media could potentially harm our case if it went back to court. In the middle of this media circus, Tyler called me. He was crying, apologizing for the article, and saying he had no idea his mom was going to do that. He sounded genuinely distressed about the whole situation. He told me something that made my blood run cold. Karen had started drinking heavily and was becoming verbally abusive towards him. I felt terrible for Tyler, but a part of me also wondered if this was another manipulation tactic. The timing seemed too convenient. But then he said something that changed everything. There's something else you should know. I found some old letters in Mom's closet. I think she was having an affair with Uncle Rob while Dad was still alive. I was stunned. Could this be true? It would explain Uncle Rob's unwavering support of Karen throughout this ordeal. My mind was racing, trying to process this bombshell. I asked Tyler to send me photos of the letters, which he did. They were vague, but there were definitely some incriminating phrases that suggested a long-term affair. I shared them with my lawyer, who said this could potentially change the direction of our case if we could prove Karen was unfaithful during the marriage. Now, I'm faced with a moral dilemma. Do I use this information to strengthen my case, or do I keep it quiet to protect Tyler and the rest of the family from the fallout? Part of me wants to expose Karen for who she really is, but another part feels like it would be stooping to her level. Through all of this, I've been trying to remember my dad and what he would have wanted. I found his old fishing rod in the garage and spent an afternoon just sitting by the lake, thinking about our times together. It strengthened my resolve. This house meant something to us, and I wasn't going to let it go without a fight. The settlement negotiations are on hold while my lawyer and I figure out how to proceed with this new information. I'm hoping we can reach a resolution soon and put this whole mess behind us. I'll update again when there's more news. This situation has turned out to be more complicated than I ever imagined. I'm starting to realize that there are no real winners in family disputes like this, only degrees of losing. Update 3. It's been another 2 months, and I have a mix of good news, bad news, and shocking revelations to share. First, the good news: we finally reached a settlement agreement. Karen and Tyler agreed to move out of the lake house. In return, I paid them the agreed upon sum for relocation expenses. It was a significant amount of money, but less than what I would have spent if the court case had continued. Now, the bad news: Karen didn't leave quietly. On moving day, I arrived to find the lake house in shambles. Furniture was broken, walls were damaged, and it looked like they had hosted a demolition party before leaving. The beautiful handcrafted dining table that my dad and I had made together was smashed to pieces. I was beyond furious. I called my lawyer immediately, but he advised me to document everything and not confront them directly. We're looking into legal options for the damage, but he warned me that pursuing this might reignite the whole legal battle we just settled. Now for the shocking part. Remember those letters Tyler found suggesting an affair between Karen and Uncle Rob? Well, it turns out the truth is even more complicated than we thought. A week after Karen and Tyler moved out, I received a thick envelope in the mail. Inside was a letter from my dad dated just a few days before his death and a stack of documents. The letter explained everything and turned my world upside down. Dad wrote that he had known about Karen and Uncle Rob's affair for years. He had chosen to stay in the marriage for Tyler's sake, but he had been quietly gathering evidence and planning his exit. The documents included private investigator reports, bank statements showing suspicious transactions, and even DNA test results. The DNA test was the biggest shock of all. According to the results, Tyler is not my dad's biological son. He's Uncle Rob's child. Dad explained in the letter that he had intended to confront Karen and start divorce proceedings, but his heart attack came before he could. He apologized for leaving me to deal with the fallout and explained that the lake house was always meant to be mine as a way of making up for the years of deception he had endured. I was reeling from this information. It explained so much: Karen's desperation to get the lake house, Uncle Rob's strong support of her, and even some of the tension I'd always felt with Tyler despite trying to be a good stepbrother. I didn't know what to do with this information. Part of me wanted to expose everything to clear my dad's name and show everyone the truth about Karen. But another part of me thought about Tyler. He was innocent in all of this, and learning the truth would devastate him. After a lot of soul-searching and discussions with my therapist, yes, I started therapy to deal with all this stress, I decided to keep the information to myself for now. I reached out to Tyler and invited him to visit me at the lake house once the repairs were done. I figured he deserved to know the truth, but it should come from me, not as part of some public family scandal. The family is more divided than ever. Those who supported me are outraged by the damage to the house. Those who were on Karen's side are saying I drove her to this with my cruelty. I haven't told anyone about the letter or the DNA test, not even Aunt Linda. I've started the process of repairing the lake house. It's going to take time and money, but I'm determined to restore it to how it was when my dad was alive. Every time I feel discouraged, I read my dad's letter again and remind myself why this place is so important. The media attention has mostly died down, but I still get occasional nasty comments from strangers who read the original article. I'm trying to ignore them and focus on moving forward. This whole experience has changed me profoundly. I've learned more than I ever wanted to know about family secrets, the legal system, and human nature. I've lost relationships with some family members, but I've also discovered who my true supporters are. I'm planning to take some time off once the repairs are done and spend a few weeks at the lake house. I want to reconnect with the memories of my dad, process everything I've learned, and figure out how to move forward. I hope this is the last dramatic update I'll have to write, but given how this situation keeps evolving, I can't make any promises. Life has a way of surprising you, as I've certainly learned through all of this. Final update. It's been 6 months since my last update, and I'm happy and somewhat relieved to say that this will be my final post on this incredible saga. A lot has happened, and I want to share how things have finally been resolved. After the damage to the lake house, I decided to press charges against Karen for vandalism. It was a tough decision, but I felt I needed to stand up for myself one last time. The evidence was clear, and she ended up having to pay for the repairs. This legal action caused another rift in the family, but surprisingly, it also led to some unexpected reconciliations. Tyler, who turned 18 during all of this, reached out to me. He apologized for his part in the drama and explained how difficult it had been living with Karen's bitterness and anger. We met up at a coffee shop, and I made the difficult decision to tell him the truth about everything. The affair, the DNA test, all of it. It was an emotional conversation, to say the least. Tyler was shocked and hurt, but he also expressed a strange sense of relief. He said he had always felt like an outsider in the family, and this explained why. We spent hours talking, crying, and trying to process everything together. In a twist I never saw coming, Tyler asked if he could move in with me. He said he couldn't bear to live with Karen anymore, knowing what she had done. After some consideration, I agreed. We've been living together at my apartment for the past few months, and it's been a journey of healing for both of us. The repairs on the lake house took longer than expected, but they're finally complete. Walking into the restored house for the first time was an emotional moment. It looked just like it did when my dad was alive, and I felt his presence there. Now here's where things get interesting. Remember Uncle Rob? Well, the truth finally came out. After Tyler moved in with me, Karen apparently had a meltdown and spilled everything to the family in a drunken rant at a gathering I didn't attend. The fallout was massive. Uncle Rob's wife left him, and he's become a pariah in the family. Karen moved to another state, presumably to escape the scandal. The last I heard, she's trying to find herself at a yoga retreat in Bali. The extended family is slowly coming back together, rallying around Tyler and me. At a recent family gathering, Aunt Linda pulled me aside and apologized for not seeing through Karen's act all these years. She's been an incredible support, especially for Tyler as he navigates his new reality. I've done a lot of reflecting over these months. While I don't regret fighting for what was legally mine, I do regret how ugly things got. I've learned valuable lessons about communication, empathy, and the importance of clear estate planning. In an unexpected turn of events, I've started dating Sarah again. We reconnected at a mutual friend's wedding, and after a long heart-to-heart about everything that happened, we decided to give our relationship another shot. She's been amazingly supportive of both me and Tyler. The lake house is now a place of healing for our fragmented family. I've started a new tradition of hosting an annual family weekend there where we fish, share memories of Dad, and work on rebuilding our relationships. Parents kicked me out at 16 to make room for my sister's new baby. Big mistake. I turned 16 just a week ago. There was no party, no celebration, and my parents barely even wished me happy birthday before kicking me out of their house. The reason behind it was my older sister Amanda. She's pretty much my parents' favorite and has always been for some reason. She's 7 months pregnant right now, and since we have a house with 4 bedrooms, my parents sat me down on the morning of my birthday to inform me that they now wanted me to move to my aunt's house so the new baby could have the room. My parents have never really cared about me and have always done the bare minimum when it came to me, but this was shocking even for me. I hardly expected anything from them. After they were done explaining to me that they'd need the new room and that I was apparently old enough to move out, we just sat there in silence for a while. They told me that they would still take care of all my expenses until I turned 18 and make sure I was well fed and looked after, but they just couldn't keep me with them in the same home anymore. I asked them why they couldn't just use the guest room for the nursery. They told me they'd used it for Amanda's boyfriend to stay with them. So to sum it up, my parents had a room of their own, my sister and her boyfriend had a room, and her baby would get its own room. Amanda wasn't at home, and I could tell that this was on purpose so she wouldn't have to watch this happen and feel guilty. My sister and I were never close because of the age gap, but she'd never really been awful to me either. We were civil to one another for the most part, but if she was okay with this arrangement and actually wanted me to leave the house so she could accommodate her new baby and boyfriend, then maybe she wasn't the person I'd thought she was. I was disappointed and even more so because it was my birthday, but I didn't say a word to them and just agreed to leave. By now, I've realized that my parents are a lost cause. There's nothing I can say to them to make them love me, and I've accepted that. So after they told me that they wanted me to move out and live with my aunt, I went up to my room and started packing. They helped me pack, but I think that was just to help me get out quickly. After I was done, they even dropped me at my aunt's house and were very happy talking to me throughout the car ride but didn't notice that I wasn't responding and was just silently staring out of the window. Once we got there, they dropped me off at the door and didn't even hug me or kiss me before leaving. My aunt welcomed me happily because she actually does enjoy my company, and as far as I know, she loves me more than my own parents do. I talked to her, and after a while, I told her how disappointed I was with what my parents were doing. She was caught off guard when I said that and asked me to repeat whatever I told her. So I repeated everything that had taken place that morning, and her smile was instantly replaced with a frown. She didn't say anything to me but grabbed her phone and said that she had to make a call and went to the other room. I didn't hear anything for some time, but then I heard the sound of my aunt fighting on the phone in a high voice. That's rare because my aunt rarely ever screams at people, and she's a really soft-spoken person, so I knew someone must have pissed her off pretty badly for her to lose her temper like this. Then she came back to the room all red in the face and still looking very annoyed, and I learned that it was apparently my parents who had pissed her off so badly. My dad, her brother, had told her that I'd actually suggested this arrangement for the sake of the baby, and I was completely happy moving out of my childhood home to live with my aunt. This is why she'd been okay with taking me in as well, since she could tell I'd never really been happy living with my parents. Me making a suggestion like that didn't seem too odd to her when my dad was trying to convince her to take me in. She's a single woman in her late 30s and has no intention of getting married or having kids, so letting me live with her was just like having a roommate for her, and she didn't have to worry about the cost of me living here either, since everything that I needed would be paid for by my dad. My aunt liked me, and she thought that I was the one who wanted to live with her, so she agreed to this arrangement. But now that she knew the truth, she'd called my father up to confront him about it because what they'd done was messed up, and she had to give them a piece of her mind. After the phone call, she was really upset, And so was I, because this was something I don't think any other kid my age goes through often. I'd always known they liked my sister more than me, but this was a little extreme if they'd literally lied to my aunt to cover this up because they knew how insanely horrible this was. They'd literally chosen to give up their guest room for Amanda's boyfriend, who's in his 20s, has a job, and lives in his own apartment. If they wanted to make it work, Amanda could have easily moved in with her boyfriend, but it was at my parents' insistence that she'd been living at home because they wanted to be closer to her, and they were ready to even sacrifice my comfort just to keep her close. I was very hurt, and so I decided to go online and expose my parents for whatever they've been doing. I didn't know if my aunt would be on board with it or not, so I waited for her to leave the room for a nap, and then I took out my phone, typed out the whole thing, and posted it without thinking. I'd mentioned not only the events of that day itself but also how my parents have never treated me fairly and that I've always been considered nothing less than a second-class citizen in my own home. I kind of had a breakdown while typing it all out, and the post was not just me exposing my parents, but it was also kind of emotional, and by the time I posted it, I was in tears. I switched off my phone after that for some time because I was scared of the repercussions that this was bound to have. An hour or so passed, and I tried to read a book but couldn't focus. Then my aunt woke up, rushed into the living room where I'd been sitting ever since I arrived at her house, and she asked me calmly if I posted something. I truthfully told her that I had, and that was it. There was no further discussion about it. So I switched on my phone and then saw that the post had been seen by several people in our family, and I'd received a lot of texts from my parents and even from my sister. In the meantime, a lot of my relatives had commented on the post and expressed how they were on my side. Some of them had even texted me and reached out to tell me that they were always there for me if I needed any help whatsoever. That was uplifting, and I felt better until I went through my parents' messages, all of which were filled with hate and anger. Obviously, they weren't pleased with what I'd done and were demanding that I take the post down. My dad had said a lot of things about me in his texts and even added that he wished I'd never been born, which was hurtful but unsurprising. My mom's texts were along the same lines, and the only ones that were even slightly different were my sister's. She didn't say much but told me that she'd like to speak to me in person if that was possible and left it at that. I didn't know what to say to any of it and was just very overwhelmed by all the people I had to respond to, so I just kept my phone aside again and didn't say anything to anyone for the next couple of days. But what I did was block my parents because I didn't have any intention of talking to them anymore. I knew they were legally bound to keep sending money for me until I turned 18, and apart from that, I didn't think I had any reason to speak to them anymore. My aunt was also fine with it, and if my dad had tried to contact her in the next few days, she didn't inform me about it, and we pretended nothing had happened at all, which meant that she was on my side and supported whatever I'd done. That was enough for me, and it was all the support I wanted or needed. For the past week, I barely had any contact with my parents, but today they showed up outside my school while I was about to leave, and they looked pissed. My friends were all well aware of the situation between me and my parents, so they accompanied me outside and kind of acted like a human shield around me so I wouldn't have to interact with them if I didn't want to. But they kept yelling out my name, and I had to respond. I walked right up to both of them and told them that I didn't want anything to do with them anymore, but they didn't pay any heed to that and told me that I needed to come home with them right away. I didn't understand why all of a sudden they wanted me to return with them when they made it so clear in the past that I was not a priority for them at all and felt like this was just them trying to redeem their image and reputation among their family members. So I told them that I wasn't going anywhere with them until they told me what was going on as a way to try and get to know why they were acting like this all of a sudden. On one hand, they looked pissed off, and on the other, they still wanted me to come back home with them. They told me that they didn't want my friends hearing this, so I told them to back off a little so I could speak to them in private. Once my friends were out of earshot, my parents told me that they were here to take me back because I wasn't answering any of their calls or texts, and they needed me to come back so that they'd be able to get their inheritance still. They explained that after I'd made that post, pretty much everyone in the family had become aware of the situation, and it had reached my grandparents. My paternal grandparents are quite well off, and they threatened my dad by saying that if they continued to treat me like this, then he'd lose his inheritance. They'd been told that if they didn't try and reconcile with me, treat me better, and make sure I was loved and looked after, then whatever my father was supposed to inherit would end up going to my aunt since she was the one taking care of me, even though she didn't need to. My dad couldn't afford to lose the inheritance because it was a significant amount of money. My parents had a decent combined income of their own, but I know that if I'd been in their place, I probably would have also wanted the same thing for myself. The only difference is that I would have had enough brains not to make it seem like they were doing me a favor by saying that they'd take me back. Because they weren't doing me a favor, they were doing this for themselves and not for me. Even then, they didn't have the common sense to at least act like they were willing to let me live with them. So I said that I didn't care about whether they got their inheritance or not and walked away without bothering to wait and hear them out, even as they screamed at me to come back. I took the bus back to my aunt's house and told her what had happened at school, and she seemed annoyed as well. To ensure that this doesn't happen again, she's contacted her lawyer so we can do something about my custody. Of course, it's still my parents who still have their rights over me, and that has to be changed if I want to live with my aunt. I also called up and thanked my grandparents for trying to fix this, but I also told them that I really didn't want to go back to living with my parents because now that I'd spent a couple of days living with my aunt, I finally felt like I was free. Living with my parents had been nothing short of suffocating, and I'd kept hoping that things would change, but they never did. My grandparents didn't live in the same city, so we didn't meet often. But whenever we did at family gatherings and holidays, my parents were always on their best behavior, so they wouldn't know how I was treated at home. It wasn't as if I was treated with cruelty, but it was more like ignorance and avoidance. On the surface, it all seemed fine, but if people spent a couple of days with me at my parents' house, they'd know that they mostly pretended I wasn't even there and cared only about my sister. After she got pregnant, that just got worse, and I was pushed to the sidelines altogether. So I told my grandparents all of this, and they reassured me that if that's what I wanted to live with my aunt, then they'd make sure that it happened. If my parents signed away their rights, then they'd make sure everything I needed was paid for by them. I was happy after that conversation because things were finally looking up for me, but it didn't last long since I just received an email from my dad a couple of hours back. It was not hateful or mean but just disappointing. He said that there was no need for me to post what had happened online and make this so public when the word of what had happened would have reached my grandparents anyway through my aunt. But now, along with my grandparents being mad at them, they also have to deal with a ton of hate from their relatives, and they're being ostracized, which seems unfair. He told me that even some of his coworkers found out about this because the post was public and it had shown up on their feed since he was tagged in it. This wasn't a good look for him at work, and what I'd done had just caused a lot of unnecessary drama in their lives according to him. So am I the asshole for posting about how my parents asked me to leave the house and move in with my aunt on my 16th birthday because my sister was pregnant and they needed my room for the baby? Update 1. So before I get to what happened, thank you so much everyone for bothering to take some time out and comment on my post. Your kind words mean a lot to me, so thank you. Now, to answer some of the questions a lot of you seem to have regarding why I hadn't left my parents' house before this and why I'd waited for them to ask me to leave, especially since my grandparents and aunt seemed willing to help. The reason for that is that I wasn't exactly treated cruelly. Like I already said in the original post, I was never treated badly as such, but I was just ignored and unwanted. That's a sort of mistreatment as well, but for me, I was just glad that I wasn't being beaten or spoken to badly. I still had a roof over my head and food to eat, so I had convinced myself that I was doing just fine and didn't think it was important for me to actually feel loved or anything. I didn't really realize that I was being neglected because it had become so normalized for me. And as for why I didn't approach my family for help, I just didn't want to burden them. I was also worried about what would happen if they refused to help me out, and somehow my parents found out. That would be very bad for me at home since my parents care a lot about appearances and stuff, and that's really why I just kept everything to myself and tried to deal with everything while suffering in silence. My aunt didn't offer to take me in herself because she didn't want to insult my parents, and she wasn't even sure if I'd want to come live with her. So we didn't do this earlier, but now that this is what's happened organically, I guess it all worked out for the best. It happened a little late, but still, better late than never. She's in talks with a lawyer right now to get my custody rights transferred to her, and it's going to be a hell of a task to convince my parents to give up their rights since now the inheritance is at stake. But even if this goes to court, I know that my grandparents and aunt will have my back. My aunt's been very apologetic to me ever since I came here because she's realized how neglected I was at my own home and feels bad for never trying to talk to me because she felt like it was not her place and letting it continue. At least the air is clear between me and my family now, and I feel a lot better about the future. Right now, there's also my sister. So in my original post, I mentioned that she texted me and told me that she wanted to meet me in person if that was possible, but I didn't know what to say to her, so I ignored that text. She'd never personally been awful to me and had adopted the same behavior that my parents had. She'd just been distant from me for most of my life, but if she had to talk to me, she was generally nice. I thought that the whole idea of kicking me out so her boyfriend and child could live with her and our parents was her idea, so I was upset about that as well since it meant that now she was going to start treating me badly and show her true colors. So I didn't get back to her. We had a weird, tense, and strained relationship, but I still liked her better than my parents since she'd be nice to me whenever we did speak. It wasn't her fault that my parents liked her more than me. So when 3 days ago, she texted me again and asked me to visit her, I decided to call her and ask why she wanted to see me. I wasn't going to go back home, which is where I assumed she'd be, but to my surprise, she told me that she was living with her boyfriend at the moment and wasn't feeling well enough to go out. So she was asking me to come see her so we could have a discussion about everything going on in the family. She told me that she had a lot of things that she wanted to talk to me about. So out of curiosity, I did go to see her. Once I got there, she first apologized to me for never speaking up for me even though she knew that our parents were playing favorites and never favored me. They'd always ignored all my achievements to celebrate hers, and I was always the least wanted kid, but she never did anything to remedy that. She just never felt comfortable speaking to our parents about this, so she just let it slide. Since I seemed okay and fine with the treatment I was getting, she felt less inclined to say anything. She'd now realized that it was pretty messed up and wanted things to change, so she apologized to me. She also told me that the living arrangement was something our parents hadn't discussed with her at all, and she'd been shocked to find out about them kicking me out to accommodate the new baby and her boyfriend because she had no idea that this had happened. She'd never even asked for any of this, and her plan had been to just live with our parents until the baby was a few months old, and then she'd move in with her boyfriend. She'd wanted to move out earlier but had stayed only at my parents' insistence. However, after my post, she realized that this couldn't continue and moved out within a week. She'd had a huge fight with our parents over her moving out because they believed that this was a bad decision, and now they weren't even talking because she'd been accused of being ungrateful and selfish. None of which she'd been, because she'd never promised my parents anything, and they just assumed things themselves. So all that drama was for nothing ultimately, since my parents ended up losing both their kids. At least she apologized to me for being a bad sister and a bad person in general, which I forgive her for, because I don't think choosing to be unforgiving and cold is going to help me in any way. We talked things out, and she told me the same thing that my aunt did, that from this point on, she'd be there for me no matter what. So that was nice. It's been a little less than a week since my original post, and I still haven't heard from my parents after the email. So I'm guessing they've given up on trying to get me back. I'm sure my grandparents must have had something to do with it, since they did call me in the middle to tell me that my parents wouldn't be bothering me anymore and that I didn't need to worry about them showing up at my school or emailing me again. I hadn't told them about the email that Dad had sent, so I'm assuming that my parents and grandparents must have talked about things. I don't know what they would have talked about, but I'm sure my parents have given up now. Update 2. Just 3 days have passed since my last update, and today my aunt told me that my parents have agreed to give up their parental rights, and the paperwork and stuff will be complete soon. She'll be taking over the legal aspect of my custody soon, and I have mixed feelings. I'm happy that I'm finally going to have a home where I don't constantly feel unwanted and unneeded, but I'm also kind of empty and sad about some things. I feel weird that this is finally happening, but this is for the best. This is what I wanted. Update 3. Okay, hey guys. A couple of weeks have passed since my aunt took over. She's my legal guardian now, so yay for that. I also found out that my parents only gave up my custody because after I told my grandparents that I didn't want to go back to living with them, they told my parents that they could either lose their entire inheritance, or they could keep 50% of whatever they were going to receive initially and give up my custody and promise not to bother me again in any way. I guess we all know what my parents picked. LOL. I'm not surprised, and at this point, I don't even care because this just makes me feel like I dodged a bullet there. Good riddance for me. I'm still in touch with my sister, though. My parents are trying to get back on good terms with her before her due date, but she wants some time to herself right now, so she's told them that she wants her space and they need to stop bothering her every day. At this point, I can't help but just laugh at what a pathetic mess they've made of their own family, but whatever. I'm happy with my aunt, and that's all that matters. I asked the kid I was babysitting, "What do you think lurks out there in the forest?" He responded with, "My mother. I've been babysitting all summer in order to make some extra cash." At first, I just asked around at school if anyone needed a babysitter for their siblings or if they knew anyone who could be interested. I started babysitting kids whose families I knew, but eventually, I needed more money, so I put up an ad on Craigslist. It wasn't long until I got a response. The family lived in the suburbs, but what bothered me was how close to the woods their house was and the fact that they didn't have any neighbors. I got a bit freaked out at first, considering the fact that they were strangers with a cabin in the woods, but I decided to push through the fear for the money. The house was a cozy little cabin, clean with a nice garden in the back that had a gate which led to a trail in the woods. They had little lanterns hung out in the garden and a swing all the way in the back. The living room had a large window that faced directly the forest, and during the day, the room was bathed in sunlight. The kitchen was right next to it, with its counter facing another huge window surrounded by pots and vines and stupid signs like "Home is where the family is" or "In this house we say sorry." Upstairs, they only had 2 bedrooms. The attic was a tiny space whose window faced the woods too. The kid was pretty quiet, honestly. I neither liked nor disliked him. I tried to form some sort of opinion, but he just didn't stand out in any way. He wasn't mean or stubborn, but he wasn't a sweetheart either. He must have been around 5 or 6 years old, so I would just put him to bed quickly and then snoop around the house. I've always been curious about whoever hired me, and I just know it's not exactly recommended, but I would just go through people's stuff whenever I felt bored. It must have been around midnight that night when I slowly pulled out one of the drawers in the main bedroom. This one had all types of trinkets, coins, notebooks, pins, and buttons. This family liked to collect useless stuff and let it hang around the house, and I liked to explore it. As I was studying this little ceramic statue of a horse, I moved around, noticing the moonlight hitting its porcelain from different angles. I debated whether to just take it or not. Would they even notice? My chest tightened and my mouth opened. The horse was no longer bathed in moonlight because this huge shadow had covered it and was dancing on its porcelain. Looking around a bit, I noticed the shadow took up half the room. I could not make out the silhouette or what could have made it. It just seemed so unexpected that fear crept up to me and froze me. Someone was at the window. I knew it could have been a bird. That's the rational explanation. And I could have solved all this doubt by just looking up, but I didn't because, what if it wasn't a bird? I stood still for so long, not knowing what to do, until it passed and the horse was lit up again by the moonlight. I breathed a sigh of relief and put the horse in my pocket. Screw it. I didn't know at the time, but that would have been my first contact with it. Something made me stop snooping around and just get downstairs. I turned on the TV and curled up on the couch. At one point during the night, I heard creaking upstairs. I know it shouldn't have freaked me out so bad, but I was still so scared that I went to check it out. The house was dark and quiet, and the 2 bedrooms facing each other were empty. Empty? Where did the kid go? Jason? My voice pierced the silence, and I felt like an intruder destroying the quiet of the night. Jason, where did you go? I kept having the feeling of being watched, so I turned around, fixated on the attic door, which was now opened. My instincts kept telling me to just leave, but my head, now spinning, refused. What if we had an intruder? What if he'd taken Jason? If I had just looked up at the window when the shadow passed, now I'd know what I was dealing with. If I just had the courage to face it. My voice sounded a lot weaker than the first time, but I still had to try. Jason? Yeah? The response was almost immediate and coming from the attic. Odd. What was he doing up there? I put my foot on the first step of the stairs. What are you doing up here? It's really late. Your parents are going to be home soon. Step after step, I tried to readjust my eyes to the darkness. The attic was really dark compared to the rest of the house, and I could make out a ray of light that traced out this tiny silhouette. Jason, are you here? What are you doing? You're freaking me out. I finally reached him and put my hands on his tiny shoulders, but he didn't respond. He was just staring out the tiny window into the woods. What's going on? I asked. What are you looking at? I sat next to him and stared out the window at the woods. There was a portion of grass beginning from the house, pierced by trees. The further you went, the denser the trees were, until you discover you were completely surrounded by the woods, unable to see the sky from how tight the branches closed around you. The forest commenced from the garden and swallowed the horizon like a dark mass blending with the sky. The window framed this darkness, this suffocating emptiness. It made me feel as if we'd reached the end of the world, and had we dared to venture into the forest, we'd just fall off the face of the earth. And there stood Jason, just staring. What are you seeing? He just wouldn't answer, so I decided to find out by myself. Studying the scenery, nothing particular stood out. Of course, I just needed to pay more attention. Yeah, the more you looked, the more movement you saw. Birds, animals, even the wind thrilled the branches and the leaves. The grass swayed gently in the wind, and then the shadows were the next thing you noticed. These forever moving stains on the ground. I could have stared out there for years. Maybe that's why Jason wasn't moving. There's just something about the night that keeps you up. What do you think lurks out there? I asked him playfully. Where? In the woods. My mom. I blinked a few times. That was unsettling. I mean, kids say weird stuff, but why would he respond to that? Was that a your mom joke? Was he trying to be funny? What do you mean? What does lurk mean? Oh, lurk means, well, when you wait or move slowly in the darkness because you don't want to be seen. So, like hiding? Yeah, but you're lurking when you also want to do something bad. Just how animals lurk before they attack. Or monsters, I added, trying to scare him. So what do you think lurks out there in the forest? My mother, he responded once again. My body tensed up. That's not funny. I don't want to be funny. Why would you say that? Your mom? That's an old joke, and it stopped being funny a while ago. I'm not joking. Okay, let's go to sleep. Your mother can't be lurking out there. I saw her, and she's pretty nice. I don't know what she told you, but she doesn't eat people. She's out with your dad now, and they're going to come home in a few hours. If they find out you aren't sleeping, I'll get a lot of SH for it. SH, don't tell your parents I said that. Come on, let's get down. I'm telling the truth. What is she? A vampire? You know, something was standing out the window earlier. I didn't really care that much about what I was saying because, in my head, everything had a logical explanation. Jason, however, widened his gaze. Yeah, that could have been her. Stop, I'm serious. And what does she want from us? Does she want to eat me? We were now in his bedroom, and I had tucked him into bed. I had my back to the window, facing the hallway, which had now become way creepier than expected. She doesn't want to eat you. That's so great. I taste horrible anyways. Good night. I tried to stand up and leave, but he grabbed me. Wait, don't go. Look at me. What now? I want to tell you about this dream I had. This dream that woke me up. But you have to pay attention, okay? So, in my dream, I was in a garden, and I was thirsty. And you were there too, and you tried to leave, but there were a lot of bushes around, and you got lost. And I found this puppet. I hate it when people tell me about their dreams, but I sat there listening, facing Jason with my back to the window. Not because his story was interesting, not because I liked being there, but because while he held me there, his eyes kept darting to the window. And I'd seen the shadow cover his face because he'd insisted I look at him. But in reality, he didn't want me to turn around. So I listened until he abruptly finished his story when the moonlight reached his face again. Thank you for the story. It was really interesting. You're welcome. Good night. Night. I spent the next hour in the other bedroom, fiddling with the little porcelain horse. This kid was a lot braver than I thought. In the silence, I kept trying to make out distinct unfamiliar sounds but didn't succeed. The house had fallen asleep, and the night had become uneventful. His parents arrived soon after that. I put the horse in my pocket and went downstairs to greet them. Was he good, Keith? Yeah, the best, don't worry. I studied both of them head to toe, their clothes, mannerisms, facial expressions, but mostly the mom. Were you good? Asked the dad jokingly. I hope so, I responded. They wanted to drive me home, but I insisted on taking my bike. I closed the door behind me, but instead of leaving, I headed to the backyard. I just wanted to see something. Climbing on the fence, I made it on the roof of the porch, right next to the bedroom window, hoping to see some signs of something. Anything. The window was covered in scratches, but nothing gave out what had been there. I stood there for a while. I don't know why. The parents had gone to sleep, and Jason was probably asleep in his room too. I studied the garden from that angle, then the woods as quiet as a mouse, then the room where the parents were sleeping. After that, I don't remember how I got home. I don't even think I took my bike. I just ran frantically until my legs bled. I didn't even scream. I didn't look around or stop, just ran until I reached my house and banged on the door. My mother answered, annoyed, and I ran past her, right to my bedroom, covered myself in a blanket, and started typing this. Because while I was watching the parents, something had caught my eye in the hallway. What I thought to be a coat hanger moved all of a sudden. It had been standing there so still, I hadn't even bothered to notice it until it disappeared out of my range, then appeared again. This bony, twisted silhouette dragged itself into the bedroom and stood right next to the mother, who was sleeping. It looked uncanny, like a human who'd starved to death with wide eyes and arms so long they trailed behind it when it walked out. It just stood there, watching the parents, then lifted a bony finger and started counting. I stood there frozen, watching this horrifying show forever scarred in my head. It kept counting and counting and counting. I was so scared to move that I would have watched it forever. It wasn't until something else happened that made me break into this exhausting run. It saw me. My ex tried to sue me for $1,130.36. Big mistake. Background: my ex and I were 3 months into separation. I kept suggesting divorce agreements, trying to find out what she would accept other than taking her back and returning to being a doormat for her. I have a good head for legal documents and understood very early that, as much as I would prefer to just burn everything down and disappear, legally, it was very likely that I was going to be paying alimony and that she was entitled to a fair share of everything. But in a no-fault state with no gender references, it did mean a fair share. That meant that, legally, our divorce settlement wouldn't be heavily biased in her favor. So, I kept trying to work with her and figure out how we could divide our assets. I did this every day for months. She would object to anything that put any responsibility on her, anything that left something of value out of her hands. Anytime I asked her what terms she would be okay with, she would just derail the conversation or something else. Not long into this, I realized that I would need a paper trail, so I switched to email only. Throughout all of this, I also recognized that a court would order spousal support, so there wasn't any point in just cutting her off financially. I wasn't a total doormat at this point, though. I had moved my direct deposit to a solo account and kept up with her weekly cash flow, and I kept paying the bills. But my final offer during this period was the heavily unfair offer of splitting the cars, one to each of us, me taking on all the debt, including her student loans, me paying her like $3,000 to $4,000 a month for a year so that she could get her feet under her, and she gets all of our stuff. I would walk away with my car, my dog, some tools, and some clothes. Still, this was a no-go. It wasn't good enough for her, and so we get to the meat of the story for this malicious compliance. 3 months in, I finally get her to agree to a mediator since I'm getting nowhere. She shows up to the initial meeting, the first time we've seen each other in a while, the second time since splitting. She had been staying with her sister. The mediator starts out with the rules of mediation and the agreements to sign. I sign easily, she balks, but eventually signs. Finally, one of the relevant terms is that we agreed not to file any other legal paperwork. We would come to an agreement, and the mediator would file the final court papers on both of our behalf to get the divorce ordered. The mediator starts asking basic questions, and every question to either of us results in my ex launching into an irrelevant topic, attempting emotional manipulation of me or him. I just ignore her and direct my interactions to the mediator. The peak was when she literally crawled on top of the big table to stick her face in mine to force me to see her and engage in her ranting. The mediator called it quits at that point. He reminded her of the rules that she agreed to, gave us homework to fill out, and had to schedule the next meeting with his clerk 2 weeks out. 3 days later, I got served with a summons to court for a hearing over spousal support. The summons showed the claim my ex made that all she had received from me in 3 months was $1,130. Oh man, that wasn't true at all. Not to mention she violated the mediator's terms. I end up on a conference call with my ex and the mediator tells her that she needs to withdraw the complaint or mediation can't continue. She adamantly insists that she knows her rights, so the mediator ends his involvement, cuts us refund checks minus time worked so far, and exits stage left. I prepare for the court hearing. I print out 3 months of bank statements and highlight every transfer to her, every bill paid on her behalf, every ATM withdrawal by her card. Also, over 100 toll bills that I received from her just driving through the express lane toll so I get the elevated license plate female to me. Altogether it was $133,000 and change. I thought to myself, you missed a couple of zeros in your complaint. My final stack of paper was rather thick, so I printed out an Excel spreadsheet summary to use as a cover sheet. I also looked up the spousal support rules again. Basically, you take the higher person's income and subtract the lower person's income, then the person who makes more money has to pay 40% of that difference to the other person. There's a little wiggle room, but that's it. Simple. She was currently getting up to 72% of my pay once you factored in her bills. This court hearing was a good thing. It wasn't as good as a mediator and having a fast resolution, but I wasn't likely to end up getting screwed here. Not to mention I had daydreams of her finding out what lying on court documents might do. The court date rolls around. I show up to court, waiting in the hall outside the family law section. She shows up, plops herself next to me, and starts going off on me again. I try to ignore her, then to keep from engaging, I start a written transcript of her ranting using the back cover of my paperwork folder. Finally, she realizes what I'm doing and ends the rant with, "Oh, I guess you're writing what I'm saying so you can make your friends hate me. Trust me, they need no encouragement." She huffs, sits a few seats away, and is quiet the rest of the time that we waited. The court officer finally comes to get us, and we head in. The officer starts giving the legal speeches and then asks my ex if she has anything to add to the complaint. She launches into a roller coaster speech, proclaiming all of my bad faults, how mean I was to try to divorce her, and how I obviously didn't need any of the money that I made because he's just going to live somewhere simple and cheap anyways. Yeah, her words. Once my ex is done ranting, the court officer asks me if I have anything I'd like to add. The court officer sees my stack of paper and eyeballs that as she's talking. I hand over the stack of papers, tell the officer that the summary sheet on top should help clear up the financial points in question, and just verbally start going through all the items. At each one, my ex interrupts to give a reason why that item shouldn't count. Every single time, the officer keeps asking her to stop interrupting but to no avail. We finally finish the list. The officer is shaking her head slightly and says, "Mr. Opp, this court process is to ensure that both parties are doing the right thing. So all of this," she says, gesturing to my stack of papers, "needs to stop right now. We will garnish your paychecks for the amount specified by law and send that to her instead." I know that this is a win. I knew that it was going to be, but she didn't. She sat there all smug as we got into the calculations. I know that she was thrilled at the idea of getting a court check directly. It sure would show me. Everything wrapped up, we got the totals, signed the papers, and I handed over a check for the first payment, and the officer got up to make copies of everything. I asked the officer if I could wait in another room while she got the copies, and she agreed while giving my ex a bit of a side eye. I got my paperwork first, with the officer saying it might take a few minutes for her to get her paperwork, but you're free to go. I got the hint and left immediately. I got in my car and immediately called my cell carrier and canceled her phone. They asked me, does she want to set up her own plan? I replied, I can't answer that. I'm hoping for a court order to remove her from my accounts. Okay, they said. Then I just worked down the remaining subscriptions that I was paying for that she used. I even had all the bills in front of me from the court documents with the account numbers and customer service numbers right there. I was done and driving home when she started blowing up my phone with incoming emails, demanding to know what I was doing, then texts from her sister's phone, then calls. I just grinned and didn't answer any of them. She stopped after an hour or so and gave me a few hours of silence. Then I got an all-caps email with a screenshot of the Netflix inactive account message. Oh my god, even Netflix. I admit it, I giggled. The fallout wasn't over, though. A month later, after she realized how much less money she got from me after winning her case, she filed an appeal. It was denied due to a lack of a reason. A month later, she filed a complaint that I wasn't paying her car payments. This was just an excuse to get into court. I had been paying it, and I was also pretty confident that even if I hadn't, she didn't know how to get into that loan's account. She legally could, she just never had cared to learn how. This time I had a lawyer, and we both went to court. My ex was joining by phone. The officer paused before calling my ex and tells my lawyer, "This lady is a piece of work." The validation of that statement will always remain with me. The call goes predictably. My ex makes irrelevant rants. The officer keeps shutting her down. Finally, the court officer asks my ex for proof that I wasn't making my car payments while she's holding documents proving that I had been. My ex nearly screams, "I just know that he isn't so that he can hurt me." The officer replies, "I am holding proof that he has paid it and is satisfying his legal obligation. This complaint is dismissed. Thank you," and hangs up on my ex. I came home early and overheard my girlfriend bragging about cheating on me, so I left without saying a word. Now she's desperately trying to find me, but I blocked her everywhere. At 38, I just found out my girlfriend, 36, of 5 years cheated on me, and I found out in the worst way. Just some background info. I've never been married nor do I have any kids. It's not that I don't want either. Life just hasn't had those plans for me yet, I guess. Anyway, to the story. Friday after work, I left to go on a weekend trip with the guys to one of my buddies' cabins on the lake. Nothing too crazy, fishing, drinking games, just good old fun. Usually, we do these trips about every 3 months to get time to ourselves and give our significant others a break from us. I usually stay through the entire weekend and just leave from there to go to work on Monday morning. However, this weekend, I left my laptop in the office room and forgot to grab it. So around 4 p.m., I started to head home, figuring I'd be there by 6 o'clock. Rachel, my girlfriend, wouldn't have eaten by then, so I called in an order at our favorite Italian place, picked it up, and headed to the house. I walked in, and everything seemed normal. I could hear Rachel laughing in the kitchen, so I figured I'd just walk in and surprise her. As I got closer, I started to overhear the conversation she was having on the phone. In an instant, my life was shattered. I assumed she was talking to her sister or maybe one of her friends, but the conversation basically went like this. "Last night was just amazing. He was such a considerate lover." Pause. "I'm telling you, I've never had anything like it." Pause. "We met on Tinder, and he took me out last night. By the time we made it through the door, we barely made it to the sofa." Pause. "Oh god, big, like twice as big as my name. I'll definitely be taking him for a test drive again." After that line, I just dropped the food on the floor. Rachel heard it and turned around. By that time, I already had tears welling up in my eyes. She hung up the phone and tried to get to me, but I just pushed her off, went up to the office, grabbed my laptop, and left. Rachel has been hysterically texting and calling for the past 4 days, and I haven't answered once. I'm staying at a motel a couple of towns over, so I doubt she will be able to find me. My buddies and mom have called as Rachel has frantically been trying to locate me, but I've assured everyone I'm okay and there is nothing to worry about. My life has been ruined by a stupid phone call. I really thought this was the girl I was going to spend the rest of my life with. I'm an only child, and my mom keeps reminding me she wants grandkids. I had planned on proposing this year on the 4th of July, as it would be our 6-year anniversary. I've already got the ring, and my buddy and his wife already know about the plan as they are the ones who set us up and hosted the 4th cookouts. Any advice from you on here would be appreciated. This is the first time I've dealt with infidelity in any relationship. I'm really just broken at this point. Do I contact Rachel? Should I hear her out? After that phone call, the thought of her just makes me sick to my stomach. Thanks in advance for anyone who reaches out or comments. Traditional_ban_723. She was bragging about cheating on you. You will never forget what you heard. Time to move on. Boston_Dana_2. Add to this, she showed you who she is. Be glad you learned now and not after being married for many years. Bushy_boy_1973. You have already heard everything from her you need. Don't look back. Best case scenario, arrange for your friends to collect your things and never speak to her again. The only closure to be had is from her side. Never give her a chance to apologize. Don't talk to her friends, or if your mutuals try to give you a message from her, ghost them too. Make a post to social media explaining what happened and tag her. I_snot_chuck_509. Yes, do this. Since you're a nice guy who probably can't imagine doing this to her, you will want to try and understand and fix things. You'll try to be a pick-me. Make it loud in public so you can't go back. You dodged a bullet, trust me. I found out this past year that half my life is a lie after 27 years together with 3 kids, and my wife cheated on me multiple times over those years. I had an opportunity to leave her the first year we dated when I found out she probably cheated on me, but I tried to understand and fix things. Don't be me. Update 1. Hello everyone. First off, I would like to thank everyone for their kind words. I have had a very stressful week, and while I did not feel up to replying to anyone's posts, I want you all to know that I read them and your words helped me through the week. This has been a devastating event for me, and each and every one of you that commented or reached out through chat brightened my day just a tiny bit. With that said, here is the most recent update. Last Friday night, after my buddies got to the hotel, I explained what I had heard on the phone call. All 3 of them were stunned, to say the least. They asked if I had seen any signs of this, and to be honest, I really hadn't. I said I didn't know what I was going to do. I informed my one buddy that the proposal was off, and given the circumstances, he completely understood. One thing I had my buddies do when they left their houses was turn off tracking in case their significant others were checking and getting back to Rachel. I know Rachel is close with one of the wives, but at this point, I didn't want to take any chances. That night, we spent the night at the hotel bar, and I tailspun pretty hard, shot after shot after shot. It wasn't pretty. My buddies were getting calls all night from their significant others, asking where they were, and to their credit, they stood their ground and backed me up, just saying that we were safe and not to worry. One asked to speak with me after assuming that where they were, but I didn't want to talk to her. She kept saying Rachel was worried and just wanted me to come home. I just told my buddy to deal with it, and I'll fill them in another time. I spent most of the night hitting on the bartender, which I'm not proud of, and a couple of girls who were traveling for work. The next day, I thanked them all for spending time with me, and they took off back home. This week, I had one of my buddies scope out the house we were renting, as it was on his way to work, and he gets to work after Rachel and I would have already left for the day. Rachel had taken Monday and Tuesday off but went back to work on Wednesday. As soon as he informed me of this, I went to the house and started packing as much stuff as I could. The house was a mess, dishes in the sink, clothes lying everywhere, trash was full of takeout and ordered food. It took me about 3.5 hours to get all my crap out. Before I left, I cleaned up for Rachel as a final gesture. That afternoon and evening, I got flooded by Rachel with calls and texts after she realized that I had come home and gotten all of my things. For now, I'm staying at my mother's house until I can find a place of my own this fall. I spoke with the landlord, and without Rachel's signature, he won't remove me from the lease, meaning I will have to cover my half of it until October. My mom has said I can stay with her until then, at which point I will try to find a new place. I know, a 38-year-old moving back in with his mother, how amazing life has treated me. I finally contacted Rachel on Thursday and told her we could meet up at a local bar and grill downtown Friday evening. I told her one of my buddies would be attending to make sure everything was on the up and up. She complained for a few minutes, saying she wanted me to come home and talk with her so we could move past this, but I told her if she wanted to see me, this was how it was going to be. Eventually, she agreed. So Friday night, Rachel shows up after my buddy and I had been there for about an hour. I had already eaten and taken a couple of shots of Ciroc to calm me. We sat down, and she wanted to make small talk, asking about me and blah blah blah. I cut that garbage off. I told her I had a list of questions. Immediately, her eyes welled up. I asked her how long this had been going on. She swore this was the first and only time. I told her to cut the crap. I said there was no chance we were ever getting back together, so just tell me the truth so I can have my closure and move on with my life. She stuck to her guns for a few minutes, but then, as most of you predicted, she came clean. Every time I went on those trips for the past 2 years, she thought I was going to cheat on her, so she was having her fun too. This set me off. I told her she was using this as a fucking excuse just to sleep around. I then asked who she was talking on the phone with, but she refused to give me an answer. I asked if they used condoms, and she said sometimes. I said she's lucky I got an STD test because I'm clean, so she doesn't have to worry about getting one unless her most recent fling didn't use one. Finally, before I left, I told her about my plans for the July 4th proposal. I showed her the ring and told her that I was going to propose at our friend's party because that was where they introduced us. It was around here that she just started crying. She begged for another chance. I told her that I will always love her, but we are over. So yeah, she's been messaging me all day, but I'm going to block her here soon. So I'm just sitting here eating some B-dubs and drinking beer while watching the fights. Hopefully, Poirier wins, but I'm doubting it. My life is a train wreck. Anyway, thanks guys for listening. I don't know if I'll update again, as I doubt I will ever talk to that see you next Tuesday again. Comments. C_Falcon_663. I knew she was going to say it was only once. They always do that. Also, this line, every time I went on those trips for the past 2 years, she thought I was going to cheat on her, so she was having her fun too. Blame shifting, classic cheater move. It's your fault. I think not. I'm sorry your landlord didn't let you out of the lease, but at least you have your mom. It's not ideal, but it's only temporary. 100% her loss. Too bad she was about to become someone's wife. A good man chose her, wanted her, and she threw it all away for fun. It's time to focus on you and your healing. Go easy on the alcohol. Be careful. You're going to be okay. Fly_Gusk_op. I'm glad that you're clean and sad that she was such a piece of shit and used as justification that she thought you were going to cheat on her on those trips. Sad also that she didn't want to tell who she was talking to, but I bet it must be someone in the inner circle of friends and possibly one of the wives of your buddies. She didn't want to give her because they could cause trouble with a male friend for supporting a cheater and might as well she was doing that too. Warn your buddies of these possibilities. Now about her reaction and manner in the restaurant. She showed no remorse at all and even tried trickle truth because if she were remorseful for what she did, she would have broken before the ring thing. She came to her senses about her stupidity when you showed her that ring and talked about the proposal. Well, now it is time for you to leave alcohol and start your healing. Travel. Hope everything goes well, and please, if you find out who is on the other end of that call, update us. Update 2. Hey there, fellow Redditors. I just want to thank each of you for the kind words. It means a lot to me. A few things have happened in the last day, so I figured I'd fill you in. Nothing too exciting, but nonetheless, here it is. Rachel is no longer invited to the 4th cookout, so I'm free and clear and don't need to worry about any confrontation with her. If you remember in my last post, while at the bar, one of the wives was trying to talk to me. She is the wife that hosts the 4th cookout. Apparently, Rachel had told her that she had only cheated once, and it was a huge mistake, and that's why she was trying to get me to talk things out with her. When I spoke with her this past Tuesday, I let her know the whole truth. She immediately called Rachel, who confirmed my line of events, was livid, and started yelling at her. She told her it would be best if she didn't show up to the event on the 4th because I was going to be there and frankly what she did to me was vile and disgusting. She then asked me to forgive her and said she had no idea. I explained it wasn't her fault, and she had nothing to ask for forgiveness for. We were both sold a lie by someone we cared about. As for who was on the phone with her, I can only imagine it was her sister. The 2 wives who are friends with her have remained solid that they had no idea Rachel was doing this, as apparently on the Saturday evening while we were away, they would have a girls' night at my house until about 11 p.m. and talk about typical girl garbage and drink wine. The one who isn't even friends with her but partook in these events confirmed it. The other thing that makes me think it was her sister is I've attempted to reach out to her 3 times now and have gotten no text back, no call back, nothing. Her mother has called and said she's upset about the breakup and asked if there is anything they can do to change my mind, but I told her that's just not happening. I went back to work on Monday after taking the week off, so I'm back to my normal routine now. No more booze in the near future. My liver will thank me for that. This community has helped me a lot, and I personally wanted to thank each and every one of you for all of it. I don't know if I'll update this account again, as it seems this is the end of the situation. Rachel has been blocked on all platforms, so right now she has no way to contact me. The cookout host said she isn't doing good right now, as she told me that before I explained what really happened, but that's life. I'm not doing good either, but I'm moving on and putting all this behind me. Thanks again, community. Y'all rock. Bought a baby monitor and accidentally caught my wife cheating in our child's room, so I got revenge by using it as evidence to win our divorce and destroying her business. I, 35M, and my wife, 33F, have been married for almost 7 years now. We met at a local fair, I asked her out, and things took off from there. It's been a good relationship and a good marriage, with our ups and downs like any other couple, but generally, we have a wholesome relationship, and I have always been thankful for that. We weren't trying for a child for a long time because we wanted to make the most of our youth. However, last year, we decided to change things up. My wife, let's call her Naomi, got pregnant, and we had our baby at the beginning of the year. I've always wanted to have a kid, so when my daughter was born, it was genuinely the happiest moment of my life. Adjusting to parenthood is hard, though, and it became clear how much it ties up your life. If you don't have dependable friends or family around, it becomes difficult to have a day to yourself unless you're open to paying a nanny, which we couldn't afford. Therefore, if we wanted to go out to eat at a restaurant, we needed to arrange for someone to watch the baby, which wasn't easy since we don't have many family members living close by. I decided we needed a baby monitor. If the baby was sleeping, we could potentially go somewhere very close by and rush back if the baby started to stir. I discussed it with my wife, and she was apprehensive, but I told her we wouldn't go anywhere more than a 5-minute walk from our place. Ultimately, we left the decision hanging. Naomi works at a flower shop she owns at the corner of our street. She's always loved flowers, so I lent her the empty store my uncle left me after passing away. She has a couple of girls who work for her, so she doesn't always go to work, but she does most days. I work remotely, so it works perfectly for us. One day, while she was at work, I bought a Wi-Fi baby monitor on a whim. I knew we hadn't concluded our discussion, but I felt winning her over wouldn't be a big ordeal. It came the next day, and I set it up in our baby's room. The camera connects to Wi-Fi, and I can check the monitor through an app on my phone. After setting it up, I went back to work and somehow forgot to tell her about it when she got back. The next day, I had several errands to run and looked forward to it because it was one of the few times I was free of parental duties. When I was about to leave, my wife begged me to take the baby along, saying she was exhausted. Though bummed, I agreed. I took my daughter and started running errands. Halfway through, I got a notification from the baby monitor app. It detected activity, and I assumed my wife went into the baby's room. I opened the app and saw my wife and another man grappling in the baby's room. Initially, I thought she was being assaulted, but soon realized they were making out. I recorded my screen to have evidence. The man bent Naomi over the edge of the crib. I wanted to scream and punch something, but I kept my composure for my daughter's sake. I questioned if this happened every time she asked me to take the baby with me. Disgusted, I couldn't describe the level of my repulsion. I didn't know what to do. Eventually, I went home and made excuses for being late. I wanted to confront her but held back. She noticed the baby monitor the next day, and I told her I had just bought it. Still disgusted and shocked, I didn't confront her right away. I needed advice on the best move to make because I was emotionally charged and didn't want to make a rash decision. Edit 1. Some suggested I was foolish for not rushing home, but I wasn't in the right mental place, and my daughter held me back from doing something stupid. She could have gotten hurt if things went out of control. Edit 2. I've decided to confront her. I'll do it tomorrow morning. I can't keep this inside me any longer. Update 1. I confronted Naomi about the affair, and though it felt good to let out the emotional baggage, I'm still very hurt. Here's what happened. When Naomi woke up, I asked her to sit down so we could talk. I told her when I bought the baby monitor, but she looked confused. I explained it was operational on the day I ran errands. She looked shocked, and when I asked why she cheated, she started to cry but couldn't answer. I asked who the man was, and she sobbed louder. Eventually, she said he was just a guy who came by the store to buy flowers for his wife. I asked why she did something so disgusting in our daughter's room. She didn't answer directly but accused me of not asking her before buying the monitor. I blew up, calling her pathetic. I felt a bit better but not back to normal. I've kicked Naomi out of the house and plan to divorce her. I need help figuring out the best way to proceed. Update 2. Months later, I'm the happiest I've been in a long time. I divorced Naomi and enlisted my close friend's wife, a divorce attorney, who was excellent. The video evidence and her premeditation worked in my favor. I ensured Naomi got served at her store to embarrass her. She called to talk things over, but I refused. During the divorce proceedings, she fought for the store, but my lawyer argued against rewarding her bad behavior. I kept the store and the apartment, gave up the car, and got joint custody of our child. I don't need to pay her anything due to her infidelity. I found John Carpenter, the man Naomi cheated with, on Facebook and messaged his wife. She didn't believe me at first but did after seeing the evidence. Their marriage is now rocky, which gives me some satisfaction. I told Naomi she had 30 days to vacate the store. She cried and even offered to pay rent, but I refused. The store is now vacant, and I'm looking for a paying tenant. Naomi's Instagram still says the store is closed for renovation, but that's a lie. She's called me several times to ask for forgiveness and to use the store again, but I won't budge. This is the happiest I've been, and I'm glad I got to hit back at her. Update 3. After the dust settled, I started focusing on rebuilding my life and giving my daughter the best possible environment. The betrayal stung, but I was determined not to let it define me. I threw myself into work and took up new hobbies to keep myself busy. In the midst of all this, I kept thinking about John Carpenter's wife, Lisa. She had been through a similar ordeal, and I couldn't help but wonder how she was holding up. One day, I decided to check in on her. It felt strange, reaching out to someone I barely knew, but I figured a supportive word wouldn't hurt. I sent her a message on Facebook, asking if she was okay and offering a listening ear if she needed to talk. To my surprise, she responded almost immediately, thanking me for reaching out and expressing how lonely and confused she felt. We decided to meet for coffee the next day. Update 4. Meeting Lisa was like meeting a kindred spirit. We shared our stories, our pain, and our hopes for the future. It was therapeutic, and soon, these coffee meetups became a regular thing. We found solace in each other's company, and a deep friendship blossomed. She was smart, funny, and incredibly resilient. The more I got to know her, the more I admired her strength and kindness. As months passed, our friendship evolved into something more. We started spending more time together, not just talking about our pasts but also about our dreams and ambitions. We went on hikes, cooked dinners, and even had playdates with our kids. It was clear that something special was forming between us, but we were both cautious. Neither of us wanted to rush into anything, fearing that our past heartbreaks might cloud our judgment. Update 5. After nearly a year of friendship, we decided to take a leap of faith. Our first official date was a simple picnic at a nearby park. It was perfect, just the two of us, the kids playing nearby, and the sun setting in the background. We talked for hours, and when we finally kissed, it felt right. It wasn't just a kiss, it was the start of something new and beautiful. Our relationship grew stronger with each passing day. We supported each other through the challenges of co-parenting and blended our families seamlessly. Both our kids got along well, and it felt like we had formed a little unit. We took things slow, but with every step forward, we felt more secure in our love for each other. Update 6. Of course, our ex-spouses were still part of our lives. Naomi tried to stir up trouble a few times, attempting to guilt-trip me into letting her back into the store or our lives. But I stood firm. I had moved on, and I wasn't going to let her manipulations affect my newfound happiness. Parents tried to force me to cancel my engagement party for my golden child brother's graduation, but I refused. Now everyone's mad at me because all the relatives came to my party instead of his. So, I, 28M, have a younger brother, Leon, 26M, who just recently graduated from college, community college, I might add. I got engaged to my high school sweetheart, Nina, 28F, around the same time. We have been together for 10 years, and it was about time that we made this official, so I proposed to her 2 weeks ago and decided to send out invitations to a party that we were hosting at our house in honor of our engagement last weekend. The party was held last night, 5 days after the invitations were sent out, and the drama around all of this has been so crazy and weird that I don't even know how to make sense of it. It all started after I sent the invitation to my immediate family, my parents and my brother, who called me up and said that I had to cancel this event. I couldn't for the life of me figure out why they would ask me to do such a thing. And when I told them that I wasn't going to do so, they told me that they had decided that they were throwing my brother a party to celebrate his graduation. And of course, it just happened to be on the same day as my engagement party. They hadn't sent out the invitations, but they were planning on doing so the same evening that I sent out mine. So now they claimed that at least one of us needed to back off and let the other celebrate their important event. We shared a family, and having two events on the same day would lead to a lot of conflict, and we didn't want that. All the cards are on the table. I'm not particularly close with my family. I get along well with the rest of my relatives, but not my parents or Leon. That was why they were not aware of the fact that I was throwing an engagement party on the same day as they were planning on throwing a graduation party. We do speak to each other on rare occasions, like we had congratulated each other when I found out that he had graduated, and they congratulated me when they found out about my engagement. We wish each other happy birthdays and holidays, but that's about it. So, when they told me that they wanted me to cancel my engagement party for their day, it was very clear in my head what I wanted to do and instantly said no. I don't mean to undermine Leon, but I think his graduating from community college at 26 is not as big of a deal as me getting engaged to Nina, the love of my life, whom I have been with for the past 10 years. And to be honest, at this point, I don't even care if I'm undermining him. I made it very clear to my parents that I was not going to cancel my event because I had already sent people the invitation, and if they wished to, they could postpone their thing since they hadn't yet sent out the invitations. I thought it was a pretty reasonable suggestion, but my parents were not happy about it, and neither was Leon. It was not surprising that they were acting this way because my brother has always been the golden child. Growing up, every little thing he did needed to be celebrated. For instance, I remember feeling this way for the first time when I was just 7 years old because I realized that on my 5th birthday, the celebration had been pretty subdued since my parents believed that I wouldn't even remember this party when I grew up. So, it had just been my parents, a couple of their friends, and just a handful of my neighborhood friends. Whereas when my brother turned 5, they went all out and literally rented out a venue so they could have a themed party for him. When I graduated from middle school, all I got was a pat on the back and a congratulations. When Leon graduated from middle school, there was yet another party to celebrate it. It was the same when I graduated from high school, then when I started college, and also when I graduated from college. I didn't get anything more than a few words of encouragement. But after middle school, I had kind of figured out that they liked Leon a lot better than they liked me. So, as soon as I graduated high school and moved out for college, I started distancing myself from them. I did not cut them off completely because they were still paying for my expenses in college, but as soon as I got a job, I kind of just stopped speaking to them. I was civil to them whenever I would see them, but I didn't keep in touch, and neither did they expect me to. Neither of us had any complaints about the situation, and we had adapted however we thought was appropriate. I never had a good relationship with Leon either, since while we were growing up, we were always either fighting or taking digs at each other. By the time we were in high school, we had decided that we were better off not speaking. Honestly, he's very different from me, and it's not the good kind of different. Because of the way that my parents have treated him right from his childhood, he has been spoiled, entitled, and pretty bratty. And I think this is something that everyone who knows our family would agree upon. He's not exactly the easiest person to be around, but my parents never seem to have a problem with anything that he does. Even though he was quite the troublemaker in high school and almost got expelled on a number of occasions, they didn't even say anything when he told them that he did not want to go to college, that he wanted to join a startup that a couple of his friends had started with a revolutionary idea, graphic printed t-shirts for teens and youngsters. How thrilling. Anyway, obviously, that did not go well. After it flopped, and he ended up wasting our parents' investment money, which he also got a free pass for. Just by the way, he decided that he wanted to go to college, but his grades were not good enough for that, and he had also taken quite a few gap years, so he had to stick to community college and get a degree in business. And now my parents wanted me to cancel my engagement party so they could celebrate his graduation. I think anybody in my place would have done the same thing, and there was nothing heartless about what I was doing. On the phone, my parents started acting like I was the worst person on the planet for deciding not to cancel my party. They said that they had always known that I was against my brother, but this was just too much. I tried to reason with them because I did not want any drama before my engagement party, but there was just no talking to them. So eventually, I got frustrated, and I told them that they were free to have their party on the same day as me, but I was not making any changes to accommodate them or Leon. Then I hung up and blocked them. I did not get a chance to speak to Leon about any of this, and neither did he bother to reach out to me. Anyway, for the next 4 days after we had that argument, I did not hear from them. But I did get to know from a bunch of my relatives that they had also received invitations to Leon's graduation party that was being held on the same day as my engagement party, and they were confused about what to do. I really did not want to drag anybody into the drama that was going on between my family, so I refrained from saying anything for the first 2 days. I told them that this was their choice, and I respected that. My relatives were free to attend whichever event they wanted, and I wouldn't mind. Obviously, deep down, I would be really hurt if fewer people showed up for my party, but I couldn't force them into doing anything. However, 3 days ago, I found out that my parents were taking the exact opposite approach. My cousin told me that my parents had apparently been telling everyone that they should not be attending my engagement party since I had been nothing but horrible to them. Apparently, they had accused me of throwing my engagement party on the same day that they had decided to throw my brother a graduation party on purpose. They claimed that they had been throwing around this idea for a couple of weeks now, but after they discussed it with me, I decided to send out invitations on the same day for my party and completely blindsided them. They were trying really hard to badmouth me, and that's when I decided that if they were going to do this, then two could play this game. Thankfully, I did not need to come up with such lies to make them look bad. I just told everybody the truth. I sent out a message to everybody who had been invited to the party, saying that I knew that my parents had probably been trying to badmouth me and telling people a very distorted version of things. So, I told them my version of things, which was the truth, and explained what we had talked about on the phone call the other day. I added that right from my childhood, I have had to deal with the fact that Leon always got celebrated no matter what he did, and I had been fine with it so far. But now it was not fair of my parents to expect me to postpone the celebration of my own milestones just to accommodate them and their golden child. So now, if any of my relatives still wanted to believe them over me, they were free to do so, but then I would really appreciate it if they did not bother to keep in touch with me after that. It was a very clear-cut, to-the-point message, and then I was kind of scared about what the response to that would be. But most of my relatives just texted me back to let me know that they could understand where I was coming from, that they were on my side because they had witnessed firsthand the kind of treatment that I had received from my parents right from when I was a child. My family members who were in the same generation as I was, like a couple of my cousins and a few of my uncles and aunts who were on the younger side, also reassured me that they were going to be attending my thing. So, Nina and I were pretty happy since most of them had RSVP'd yes. Last night, we had a total blast at the party. To my surprise, pretty much everyone who had been invited had shown up, and I don't even think it had been a dilemma for any of them. People told me that when they started receiving messages from my parents, they knew that there was something off about what they were saying and refused to believe that I would do something as underhanded as what they were accusing me of. I was really not the kind of person to intentionally throw a party on the same day as my brother just to steal his limelight, and I was glad that people knew that. Besides, a lot of people told me that they were glad that I was standing my ground and not giving in to my parents' demands since I was right about how unfairly I had been treated all my childhood. So, not only did I get to celebrate my engagement with my friends and family, but I also got to know that most people in my family were on the same page as me when it came to my parents and my brother. Overall, the party was a huge success, and I was very happy until I woke up this morning. As soon as I woke up, I received a visit from the last people that I wanted to see, my parents and Leon. When they started ringing the doorbell, I really had no intention of letting them in and told them to go away, but my dad said that they were here to speak to me, and they would not be going anywhere until they had had a discussion with me. I wanted to call the cops, but Nina convinced me to just speak to them for once and end this matter once and for all. So, I decided to let them in. As soon as they entered, my parents started hurling accusations at me. I was quite taken aback and pretty disoriented since I had just woken up a couple of minutes before that, but they were already accusing me of being incredibly jealous of Leon, which is why I had decided to do such a thing. They disclosed that barely anybody had shown up at their party, and even the ones who had made an appearance left within just a couple of minutes after making some polite small talk so they could attend my party. They said that they knew about the message that I had sent to our relatives, and I defended myself by saying that I did not want to do something like that initially, but they had forced my hand by trying to badmouth me and lying about me. Anyway, it seems like my words were not even reaching their ears because they were so loud with their accusations. They believed that I was doing all of this just because I was jealous of Leon and wanted to hog the limelight all the time. They said that I was tearing the family apart. After some time, I guess Nina realized that there was no point in trying to have a discussion with them because they were clearly not civilized enough for that. She intervened and said that she was going to call the cops if they did not leave that very instant. After that, they started leaving, but they were still calling me a lot of derogatory names. Leon even slammed the door of our house so hard when he shut it while he was leaving that even the windows rattled for a good few seconds. I had half a mind to call him back and let him have it, but I decided to let it go. I was pretty pissed, and so was Nina. But then, an hour after they left, we received a message from an unknown number, probably a friend's or someone's number that they were using because we had blocked all of them. The message said that all things said and done, we were still family, and they were really disappointed that I had chosen to have an engagement party on the same day as Leon's party since this was the one thing that I could have let him have. They said that he was already graduating college at 26, which was something that he was embarrassed about, and they were just trying to put a positive spin on it. On top of that, his business had also recently failed just a couple of years ago, so it was not like he had much cause to celebrate, and they were just trying to cheer him up. But I never even bothered to think about it like that. So, they said that they were very disappointed and had expected me to be more mature about this. They also apologized for trying to badmouth me but said that they had no other choice because they really wanted this party to be a success. Ever since I received that message, I've been really confused. On one hand, I know that this is classic manipulation, but on the other hand, what if they are really sorry? Nina is kind of conflicted as well, so we are here. So, AITA for having my engagement party on the same day as my brother's graduation party? Edit. Some of you seem to have a problem with the fact that my relatives did not step up for me and try to do something when they had always known that my parents did not treat my brother and me equally. In their defense, I would just like to say that they did all that they could. They always tried to be there for me and were always nice and kind to me. I'm pretty sure that a few of them had even tried to speak to my parents to make them realize that what they were doing, the way they were treating me and Leon so differently, was not fair to either of us. But my parents did not care, and honestly, what more could they have done? It's not like it was a crime bad enough to warrant demanding custody of me. That would have just been absurd, and I don't think anybody wanted to do that either since they also have their lives and their families to think about. Besides, I was doing just fine. I generally stopped having expectations from my parents after a certain point, so I do not mind that they put my brother up on a pedestal and did not seem to care much about me. As long as everything was paid for, I didn't care. I'm on good terms with the rest of my family, and I don't mind the fact that most of them are on good terms with my parents and my brother as well. I haven't made them choose. I had just said that if they chose not to attend my party, then we would have had a problem. But honestly, all of them did, and I don't mind anymore if they continue to be on good terms with my parents and Leon. I had made that very clear at the party as well. Anyway, most of you were questioning why I had even bothered to keep in touch with the rest of my family, and yeah, this is why. I just don't think that it's that deep. This is between my parents, my brother, and me, not them. And I don't want to drag them into this for no reason. Update 1. So, a couple of days have passed, and after reading most of the comments on my original post, I decided that I had nothing to apologize for. I kept my parents and Leon blocked, and I also blocked the number that they had texted me from earlier after messaging them that I did not feel like speaking to them anymore and would really appreciate it if they stayed away from me from now on. For the last 3 days, I did not hear from them, and neither did any of my relatives have anything to say. Today, however, was pretty different since right before Nina and I were about to leave for work, my mother paid us a visit. It was just her this time. My dad and Leon were not with her, and she is usually a lot quieter than them. So, I decided to let her in because I thought that we could finally have a civilized discussion like grown-up adults instead of having a shouting match. Once she was inside, she told me that she was there to talk to both of us, so Nina needed to be a part of the conversation as well. We sat together, and then she started off by saying that she really regretted whatever had happened recently and wanted to apologize on behalf of all 3 of them. To be honest, I don't really count that apology since if all 3 of them actually wanted to apologize, they should have shown up together and apologized. Just sending my mother and saying that they were sorry simply does not cut it, but I did not say anything about it. Then my mother went on to say that even though she knew that they had messed up, she was still pretty pissed off about one thing that had happened on their last visit. She said that she respected the fact that we had been together for 10 years and considered Nina like her own daughter, but the last time they had visited, she had threatened to call the cops on my father, and now she believed that they were owed an apology for that because no matter what, this was between family, and she wasn't family just yet. My mother said that Nina had been screaming in my dad's face, threatening to call the police, and had even said that he needed to get out of our house right then. That had been incredibly disrespectful. So now, since they were ready to apologize for what they had done, she expected the 2 of us to apologize as well because we had also treated them with no respect. Nina because she had yelled at my parents and I because I had allowed it and just stood by silently watching while my fiancé shouted at my parents. For a second, neither of us knew what to say, but then I got really annoyed by what was being said, and I told my mother that while I appreciated the gesture that she had made by showing up and apologizing on my family's behalf, it was completely unnecessary. I had really believed that this time, since it was just my mom, she would at least see sense and try to make things right. But even now, they could not let go of their massive ego. I told her straight to her face that she had just wasted half an hour of our time and that we did not need a lecture on morals from her. I told her that Nina was perfectly well within her rights to scream at whoever she wanted because they were the ones who had shown up at our house uninvited. Even though we had opened the door because we had genuinely believed that we could have a discussion with them and clear the air, they had proved us wrong by acting like psychotic people and screaming in our faces and hurling accusations at me as soon as the door was open to them. And more importantly, it did not matter to me if they considered Nina family or not. For me, she was my family, even more so than them, if I'm being honest. So, in my opinion, neither of us owed them any apology, and neither did I want one from them at this point. I told my mother that now, since she had said whatever she had come to say and we had heard her out, we were done, and she needed to leave. But she refused to get up and said that she was not going to accept this kind of behavior from me. It genuinely started getting a little exasperating, and I ended up telling my mother that I honestly did not care what kind of behavior she was going to accept from me because I was not even interested in interacting with my family anymore. After I had graduated from college, I had distanced myself from them anyway, and now, after everything that had happened, I simply did not want to speak to them ever again. So, I was fine with it if she did not like this kind of behavior. She did not have to put up with me because, as I wanted her out of my life, the same went for my dad and my brother. So, we argued for a bit, and then she told me that now, since I had made it so clear that I did not want them in my life, they were leaving, and she was going to make sure that I never got to speak to them ever again. I told her I was fine with that, and then she finally left. We ended up getting late for work by a lot, but at least I'm going to count on this interaction to put an end to all of this because, frankly, I'm getting sick of my family. The next time any of them show up at my house, I'm simply calling the cops. That's it. Update 2. Hey, so it's been 3 weeks since my last update, and Nina and I had really expected this whole thing to have blown over by now. But last night, my parents decided to pay Nina's parents a visit. Like I said, we have been together for 10 years, so even our families know each other pretty well. Nina's parents live just a couple of blocks away from mine, so they showed up at their house at 10 p.m. to talk to them about our children and their horrible behavior. At first, Nina's parents did not know what to do because they knew about our recent fights, but eventually, they let them in because they did not want to be rude. Anyway, as soon as my parents were in and speaking to Nina's parents, they started lamenting about how they didn't even know where they had gone wrong with raising me and were so upset that I had turned out this way, whereas Leon was the epitome of what a good son should be. They started talking about how he was still choosing to live with them because he did not want to abandon them in their old age. Yeah, as if that's the real reason and not because he doesn't have the money to live by himself, and my parents allow him to live rent-free and don't even expect him to pay for any of the other expenses or bills. Anyway, for a couple of minutes, they went on and on about how great Leon was and how I was nothing but a disappointment. By then, Nina's parents had figured out that the two of them were probably a little tipsy. Then they started talking about Nina and the way she had apparently insulted them the last time they had seen her and told her parents that they did not mean to be rude but had never expected Nina to behave this way with them. So they were quite taken aback since she had always been a shy and quiet girl, but now, since she had the ring on her finger, she had started showing her true colors already. But apparently, they were there because they had a plan in mind. Soon enough, they would be able to get us to fall in line and respect our parents more. The plan that they had come up with was a brilliant one. They had apparently decided that neither they nor Nina's parents were going to agree to pay for our wedding, and then we would be left with no other option but to apologize for our behavior and try to be better children to them. I don't understand why they would drag Nina's parents into any of this because we have always had a good relationship with them because they are, you know, what's the word? Oh yes, normal, unlike my parents, who are as deranged as they come. Nina's parents called us up after my parents had left and filled us in on whatever had happened. I really wanted to be mad at them, but the whole thing was so weird that all of us ended up having a good laugh over it. I'm really glad that she and her parents did not take offense at my parents' behavior because otherwise, I might have been in trouble, and once again, I would have to apologize for my parents' behavior. But my future in-laws are actually pretty chill and told me that I did not need to worry about any of this. They had known my parents for a long time and knew that there was something wrong with both of them, so they did not mind. The next time that they showed up, they would just not let them in. Anyway, I'm glad that we were able to sort that out without any trouble. I just hope that after they don't receive any response from Nina's parents, they get the hint and don't bother them again. Still, just for good measure, I'm going to unblock them and tell them not to bother anybody else in the family or I would be forced to take legal action against them. I don't know what I would do, but I'm pretty sure that even if I just bluff about it, they will be intimidated, and maybe that will make them back off. That's the plan for now. Let's see if they try to do anything funny or not. Update 3. Hey, so it's been close to a year since I last posted, and for almost a year, I've been in no contact with my parents and my brother. I've got to say it's been the best year of my life. Also, 2 months back, Nina and I finally got married, and everybody whom I loved attended the wedding. We had a fantastic time, and a couple of weeks back, we finally got back from our honeymoon. My parents did not wish me, neither did Leon, and part of me is glad because otherwise, I would have to interact with them. Right now, I'm just enjoying marital life, and I can't wait to spend the rest of my life with her. As long as she is by my side, I'm not really worried about anything. My spoiled sister is demanding I make her the CEO of my company because my parents said so. Big mistake. I'm 25 years old and my sister is 23. My parents have always babied her from a young age. If I had the newest gadget, my sister would throw a fit, and I would have to give it to her. When I worked multiple jobs to buy myself a used car, my sister threw a fit, and my parents bought her a brand new car that she ended up crashing. Growing up with her was unfair, and I blame my parents for raising her to be a spoiled brat. By the time I turned 18, I had enough of my family and ended up moving out. Of course, my sister mocked me and told me that my dad said they could merge my room into hers to make it bigger. I rolled my eyes and told them I was done with the family. I got a job as a mechanic through a friend of mine and had experience since I had practiced fixing the car I bought back in high school. For the next 4 years, I didn't have contact with my family and worked hard at the shop. By the time I was 22, I decided to open my mechanic shop and quickly became profitable through connections and social media marketing. I finally had something to call my own and was proud of my hard work. 3 years went by, and I ended up opening another shop at a busy location. I also started selling used cars, which also became profitable. I was doing well for myself and considered myself very successful for my age. Recently, I got a call from my other location saying someone was looking for me. It was my parents and sister. I hadn't heard from them in years, and all three of them just showed up at my shop unexpectedly. I drove 15 minutes to my other shop and saw them waiting in the lobby. They saw me, and my parents hugged me, saying they hadn't seen me in a while. My sister hugged me and told me she missed me. For a moment, I thought they had changed and were trying to make amends, but I was wrong. In my office, my parents told me I had grown very successful. I smiled and told them it was through hard work and dedication. That's when they started explaining that my sister had dropped out of college and had been unemployed since. They said my sister had seen my mechanic shop's Instagram page and wanted to be the boss. I was speechless and started laughing. "You must be joking," I said. My dad looked at me with a blank stare and said I could still work as a mechanic, but my sister would be the boss instead of me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I looked at them in total disbelief and asked if they were all thinking correctly. I asked in what universe it would be fine to give my sister the business I worked hard for. As I continued yelling, my sister started preparing to throw a tantrum. She began crying and looked at my dad with sad puppy eyes, saying she didn't have a job and that my dad promised she would be a boss. I angrily asked my dad why he was raising her like this. I told him that if my sister wanted to become a boss, she should start her own business. My dad yelled back, trying to lecture me, saying I should help my family. I told them all to leave my shop and never return. I thought that would be the end of it until the following week when I arrived to drop off lunch for my workers. To my surprise, my sister was inside my office, sitting in my chair. She asked what I was doing there. I angrily told her to get out of my shop immediately, or I would call the cops. She argued that my dad told her I agreed to their demands to make her the new boss. I took a deep breath and told her firmly to leave, or I would call the cops. She didn't budge, so I called the cops and explained the situation. Despite their arrival, my sister still claimed she had every right to be there. They had no choice but to arrest her for trespassing on my property. After the arrest, I took legal action to ensure she wouldn't bother me again. I obtained a restraining order and set legal boundaries to protect me and my business. My parents called me afterward, yelling at me. I told them all to go to hell and to enjoy the retirement home once they're old because my sister won't be there for them. But the drama didn't end there. 2 months later, I started receiving anonymous threats. Someone was vandalizing my shops, broken windows, slashed tires, graffiti. It was clear someone wanted to sabotage my business. I installed security cameras and hired night guards. One night, the cameras caught my sister and her friends breaking into my shop. They were caught red-handed, spray painting thief and traitor on the walls. I had no choice but to press charges. The situation got worse when my parents decided to sue me. They claimed that the business was partially theirs because they had raised me and supported me financially as a child. It was absurd, but they were relentless. The legal battle was draining, both financially and emotionally. I fought back with everything I had, presenting evidence of my hard work and independence since I moved out at 18. During the trial, shocking revelations came to light. It turned out that my parents had been manipulating my sister into believing that the business was rightfully hers, hoping that she would secure their financial future. They had squandered their savings on lavish lifestyles and had nothing left. My sister, desperate and naive, followed their lead. The court ruled in my favor, acknowledging my sole ownership of the business. My parents and sister were left with nothing. The judge even issued a stern warning to my parents for their manipulative behavior. As they left the courtroom, defeated, my sister tried one last time to guilt-trip me, saying I was abandoning my family. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "Family doesn't manipulate and destroy each other. I want nothing more to do with any of you." Months passed, and I focused on rebuilding my business and my life. I cut all contact with my sister and parents, ensuring they could no longer interfere with my hard-earned success. I learned to move on, focusing on the future and the life I chose to build, free from their toxic influence. My whole class cheated, and I think I'm the only one who got away with it. One time in college, one of my older professors accidentally stapled answer sheets to the back of every test. It was one of those early morning exams where everyone was half asleep, including the professor, it seemed. A few minutes after all the tests were handed out, the teacher took a phone call and stepped outside. At that point, everyone noticed the answer sheet, and we decided to keep quiet and just tear it off when we were done. All the questions were multiple choice except the last one, which said, "Answers will vary." Once I finished the test, I went to the podium to turn it in, but I was curious about what other people wrote for the last question. So, I discreetly took a look at some of them. I kid you not, all the tests I looked at literally said, answers will vary, as their actual answers. I stood there frozen for a second, not believing college kids could be so stupid. But then I started to second guess myself. Did the professor do this on purpose? Was this some kind of test within a test? I decided to play it safe. For the last question, I wrote a generic answer about how perspectives on the issue could differ depending on individual experiences and background. It was vague, but it felt safer than copying the prompt word for word. Anyways, I passed my test and was never called back. I didn't know anybody in that class, and this was my last test before I graduated, so I never found out if they got caught or not. I graduated, got my degree, and moved on with my life. Years later, I'm sitting at my desk at work when I get a message on LinkedIn from one of my old college classmates. Let's call him Mark. Mark and I were never really close, but we had shared a few classes together. The message read, "Hey, do you remember that economics class where we all cheated on the final? Something crazy happened. Call me." Curiosity got the better of me, so I gave him a call. Mark picked up almost immediately, sounding a bit breathless with excitement. "Man, you're not going to believe this," he started. "Remember how everyone copied answers will vary for the last question? Well, turns out, the professor did that on purpose." My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "The professor stapled the answer sheets on purpose to see who would cheat and who wouldn't. It was all part of some study he was doing on ethics in academia. The answers will vary question was the real test. Everyone who wrote that got an automatic fail for the course." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "But I passed," I said, feeling a cold sweat forming. "I didn't write that." "Exactly," Mark exclaimed. "You were one of the few who didn't fall for it. The professor wrote a whole paper on it. He got some kind of award for it, too. Your name was mentioned in the acknowledgments as one of the students who didn't cheat." I felt a mix of relief and disbelief. "Wait, so everyone else failed?" "Yeah, man. It was a huge scandal. A lot of people had to retake the course. Some even faced disciplinary actions. I can't believe you didn't hear about it." I shook my head, still processing the information. "I guess I got lucky." Mark laughed. "More like you were smart. Anyways, I just thought you'd want to know. Crazy how things turn out, right?" We chatted for a bit longer before saying our goodbyes. As I hung up, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of vindication. I had always prided myself on my integrity, and in the end, it had paid off in ways I never could have anticipated. But the story didn't end there. A few weeks later, I received an email from the same professor who had given that infamous test. He wanted to meet up for coffee. Intrigued, I agreed. When we met, he explained that his study had gained significant attention, and he was now writing a book on the subject. He wanted to include my story and even offered to pay me for an interview. As we talked, he revealed more details about the experiment and how it had impacted his teaching methods. As I left the coffee shop, I felt a sense of closure. What had started as a bizarre twist of fate had turned into a defining moment in my academic journey. And while I never found out the fate of all my classmates, I learned an important lesson about integrity and the unpredictable ways it can shape our lives. But here's the kicker. A few months after the book was published, I received another message, this time from a journalist. They were doing a follow-up story on the professor's study and had uncovered something shocking. Turns out, the professor had initially failed to get approval from the ethics board for his experiment. The whole study was under review, and there was a possibility that the results, including my heroic non-cheating, could be invalidated. Suddenly, my sense of vindication was replaced with a new uncertainty. Had I really done the right thing, or was I just a pawn in a flawed experiment? The journalist wanted my perspective, and as I agreed to an interview, I realized that my college test was far from over. The real test was just beginning. A few months after the book was published, I received another message, this time from a journalist. They were doing a follow-up story on the professor's study and had uncovered something shocking. Turns out, the professor had initially failed to get approval from the ethics board for his experiment. The whole study was under review, and there was a possibility that the results, including my heroic non-cheating, could be invalidated. I was sitting at my kitchen table, sipping my morning coffee when I got the call. The journalist, a woman named Sarah, sounded both excited and apologetic. "I know this might come as a surprise, but we'd really love to get your perspective on this," she said. "Could we meet up sometime this week?" I agreed, feeling a mix of curiosity and apprehension. We settled on a local cafe, and a few days later, I found myself sitting across from Sarah, her tape recorder between us. "So, first of all, how did you feel when you heard about the study and your part in it?" she asked, leaning forward with interest. I shrugged, trying to play it cool. Honestly, I was shocked. I mean, who expects to find out years later that they were part of some ethical experiment? Sarah nodded, jotting down notes. "And how do you feel now, knowing that the study might have been conducted unethically?" I sighed, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. "It's complicated. On one hand, I'm glad I didn't cheat, and it's nice to be recognized for that. But on the other hand, if the whole thing was flawed from the start, does it even matter?" Sarah gave me a sympathetic smile. "I can see why you'd feel that way. The ethics board is reviewing everything now, and there could be some serious consequences for the professor." We talked for a while longer, and as I walked back to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. What if the entire experience I had prided myself on was just a sham? It felt like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. A few weeks later, I got another call, this time from the ethics board. They wanted to interview me as part of their investigation. I agreed, and a week later, I found myself in a small, stuffy office, facing a stern-looking panel of reviewers. They asked me all sorts of questions about the test, the class, and my interactions with the professor. I did my best to answer honestly, but the whole experience was nerve-wracking. As the meeting wrapped up, one of the reviewers, a kind-looking older woman, gave me a reassuring smile. "Thank you for your time," she said. "We'll be in touch." I left the building feeling drained and uncertain. It was like being back in college, waiting for the results of a big exam. Except this time, the stakes felt even higher. A month later, I got a letter from the ethics board. With trembling hands, I tore it open and read the contents. The board had concluded that while the professor had indeed conducted the study without proper approval, the data collected was still valid. The professor would face disciplinary action, but the results of the study, including my non-cheating, would stand. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It wasn't a perfect outcome, but it was something. The professor's unethical methods had been exposed, but my small act of integrity remained recognized. Years passed, and the story faded into the background of my life. I got married, started a family, and moved on with my career. But every now and then, I'd get a message or an email from someone who had read the professor's book or heard about the study. They wanted to know more about the hero student who didn't cheat. One day, I got a particularly interesting message. It was from a filmmaker who wanted to turn the story into a documentary. I was hesitant at first, but after some convincing, I agreed. The filming process was surreal, and as I recounted my experience, I realized how much I had grown since that fateful test. The documentary premiered at a small film festival, and to my surprise, it received rave reviews. People were fascinated by the story of the accidental answer sheets, the ethical dilemmas, and the eventual exposure of the professor's methods. After the screening, a young woman approached me. "Hi, I just wanted to say your story really resonated with me," she said. "I'm a student, and I've faced similar pressures to cheat. Hearing how you handled it has inspired me to stay honest." Her words hit me harder than I expected. In that moment, I realized that my story, flawed as it was, had made a difference. It wasn't just about a test or a study, it was about integrity, and how our actions, even the small ones, can have ripple effects. Today, I messed up by texting my pregnant wife that this isn't working. The morning started like any other. I kissed my wife goodbye, marveled at her growing baby bump, and headed to work. We had ordered a beautiful freestanding mirror for our bedroom, and I was excited to see it delivered today. I sent her a quick text. The new mirror came in. "I'm going to try to put it together, but I may need your help later." Then, I headed into the office, eager to tackle the day's tasks. My office had a strict policy against phones during work hours, so I dutifully turned mine off and placed it in my desk drawer. Little did I know, this simple act would set off a chain of events that would unravel the day. After a busy morning of meetings, I finally got a chance to tackle the mirror assembly during my lunch break. I unpacked the mirror, laid out the pieces, and began to work. To my dismay, it was more complicated than anticipated. After an hour of frustration and a few minor injuries, I admitted defeat. I typed out a message to my wife. "This isn't working, and at this point, I think I need to just give up." I hit send, feeling a bit defeated but not too concerned. I imagined she'd laugh at my inability to assemble a simple mirror, and we'd finish it together later. Hours passed. When I finally turned my phone back on, I was greeted by a barrage of notifications. 30 missed texts and calls from my wife. My heart sank. Her messages ranged from confused to frantic, asking how I could do this to her. I had no idea what she was talking about. I tried calling her, but she didn't pick up. Desperate, I sped home, my mind racing with every worst-case scenario. I replayed the morning in my head, wondering what could have gone so wrong. I burst through the front door to find my wife packing a suitcase, tears streaming down her face. She looked up, saw me, and started sobbing harder. I dropped to my knees, crying, begging her to tell me what was wrong. Through her sobs, she told me she received a text from me saying I wanted a divorce. She showed me the message, and my heart dropped. I immediately realized what had happened. My first text about the mirror had not gone through. Only the second, ominously ambiguous message had arrived. I tried to explain, to piece together the misunderstanding. It was about the mirror. I swear, I was talking about the mirror. She looked at me, confusion replacing the anger on her face. Slowly, understanding dawned. We spent the evening in tears, holding each other, her packing forgotten. She told me she had even contacted a divorce lawyer in her panic, unable to understand why I would send such a cold message out of the blue. We laughed through our tears at the absurdity of it all. She vowed to never let me attempt any more assembly projects without her supervision. We ordered takeout, too exhausted to cook, and sat on the couch, holding each other, promising to communicate better. The next morning, we woke up, both a little more tender and cautious. We recounted the story to each other, the absurdity of it slowly turning into something we could laugh about. We decided to give the mirror another try, this time together. It stood in our bedroom by the end of the day, a reminder of how easily things could be misunderstood but also how quickly they could be fixed with love and communication. A week later, we were at a dinner party with friends. The story had become one of those legendary mishaps, shared with laughter and mock horror. My wife, now less emotional about it, had taken to calling the mirror the divorce mirror. Months passed, and the memory of the mirror incident became a fond, albeit embarrassing, memory. But then, one day, we received a package in the mail. Inside was a small mirror, beautifully framed, with a note that read, "To help reflect on what truly matters." Confused, we looked at each other. There was no sender information. We chalked it up to a thoughtful friend who knew our story. We hung the mirror in the hallway, a small, daily reminder of our journey. About a year later, on a quiet Saturday morning, there was a knock on the door. I opened it to find an older woman standing there, looking hesitant. She introduced herself as the previous owner of our house. She had a wistful look in her eyes as she explained that she had lived here with her late husband, who had built that very same freestanding mirror for their bedroom many years ago. She had heard about our story through mutual acquaintances and wanted to see the house one more time. We invited her in, and she shared stories of love, laughter, and challenges. It was a poignant reminder of the love that had built our home before us and the love that would continue to grow within its walls. As she left, she turned and said with a smile, "May your reflections always be clear and your misunderstandings few." We stood together in the doorway, watching her leave, feeling grateful for the unexpected ways life brings lessons in love. Our home felt warmer that day, not just because of the memories we had made but also because of the ones we had inherited, woven into the fabric of our daily lives. The real twist came a few weeks later. My wife and I were going through some old boxes in the attic when we found an old diary. It belonged to the previous owner, the same woman who had visited us. In it, she had written about her own marital struggles and how that mirror had been a gift from her husband to symbolize their commitment to never giving up on each other, no matter how tough things got. We sat there in the attic, reading her words, feeling an even deeper connection to our home and to each other. That mirror, once a symbol of a misunderstanding, had transformed into a beacon of hope and resilience, a testament to the enduring power of love. Stepdad demands rent after I turn 18. He doesn't know I own the house. I'm about to turn 18 in a few months, and things have taken a surprising turn at home. Let me set the stage for you. I live in a house that belonged to my biological dad. He passed away when I was only 6 years old. Now, my dad and my mom weren't married, but when he died, he left the house to me. So, my mom and I have been living here ever since. A couple of years after my dad passed, my mom started dating again. And that's when my stepdad came into the picture. They got married, and he moved in with us. It seemed like everything was going okay until recently. You see, for the longest time, my stepdad was under the impression that the house belonged to my mom. No biggie, right? Except this misunderstanding led to a pretty awkward conversation just the other day. As my 18th birthday approaches, my stepdad sat me down for a serious talk. He casually mentioned that once I'm 18, I should start paying rent if I wanted to continue living here. It was a bit of a shock. I mean, paying rent in my own house? That sounded weird. So, I corrected him, explaining that the house actually belongs to me as it was left to me by my dad. He literally laughed. He thought I was joking. I couldn't believe he didn't know. So, I had to clear things up. I talked to my mom about it, and she confirmed she had never actually told him that the house was mine. When he finally realized I was serious, the atmosphere changed. He was clearly embarrassed but tried to justify his initial request by saying he thought my mom owned the house. The next day, things felt a bit tense at breakfast. I decided to address the elephant in the room. I told them both that since the house was indeed mine, the fair thing would be for them to start paying rent if they planned to stay after I turned 18. I wanted to turn the tables and see how he'd react, given his previous stance on my independence. My stepdad was taken aback. He argued that this was unfair and a sudden change to drop on them without warning. He said it was harsh and that you don't treat family like that. It was ironic considering he had no problem dropping the rent bomb on me just the day before. He tried to defend his point by saying that his initial idea was meant to help me learn financial responsibility and prepare for adult life. But I shot back, asking how it was any different when he lives here without contributing financially. What does that teach him? I asked. The argument got pretty heated. He accused me of being spiteful and trying to get back at him. He ended the conversation by calling me out of line and walked away. My mom stayed quiet during most of the argument, but later she told me she thought I was being too hard on him. She agreed that he shouldn't have asked me to pay rent, but she felt my reaction was pushing the family toward a split. Despite the blow-up, life went on as usual but with an unspoken tension in the air. Over the next few weeks, we all kind of danced around the topic. I spent a lot of time thinking about family dynamics and the concept of home. It wasn't just about rent, it was about respect and understanding, about acknowledging each other's positions and feelings. I decided to have another conversation with my stepdad. This time, I approached it differently. I explained that I wasn't trying to kick them out or act spiteful. I wanted us to act like a family that supports each other, not one that takes advantage. I suggested maybe we could work out a system where they help with some bills or maintenance costs instead of traditional rent. It would be a way for all of us to contribute to our home and help maintain it. This conversation went a bit better. My stepdad seemed to understand where I was coming from, and we agreed to sit down with my mom and discuss a fair solution. It was important to me that we all felt like we were being treated fairly and that home remained a place where we all wanted to be. Looking back, I learned a lot about handling difficult conversations and standing up for myself. I also saw the importance of clear communication and respect in keeping a family together, even when things get tricky. It was a big moment for me, stepping into adulthood not just in age but in understanding and managing real-life situations. Am I the a-hole here? Now for some comments. Not the a-hole. Charge him rent. It's not spiteful. That's what adults do. They either buy homes or pay rent for the places they live. He doesn't think you should be allowed to live rent-free when he thought your mother owned the house, but he thinks he should be allowed to live rent-free. Tell him to cough up or leave. Edited to add, By the way, he told you that you have to pay rent in a house that he doesn't even own. Even if your mother did own the house, any rental agreement should have come from your mother, not him. You are not his child. He has no business parenting you, even if he had the best of intentions. When he tells you he was only doing it to prepare you for life and adult responsibilities, I call BS. If that's the way he truly felt, then he would have gone through your mother since she's related to you and he thought it was her house. It wouldn't surprise me to learn that he was hoping that you'd pay him rent, lining his pockets with free money, collecting rent on a house that isn't even his. It's unfair because it's a sudden change? Gee, it was perfectly fine when the sudden change was happening to you. Not the a-hole. He needs to act like an adult and pay his own way in life. Get a rental contract and make them sign it or start the eviction process. You know that he would 100% make you pay up or get out. Not the a-hole. Oh, when the shoe is on the other foot, your stepdad is all about taking care of family. Why wouldn't your mom tell him at some point? You would want to either have this as your home or sell it or rent it out for income. Did she really believe that she and he would just continue to live there forever? I would stand firm and draw up a lease that would begin in 30 days. This is your house, and honestly, I don't believe that your mom had any intention of ever letting this be your home. Now that he knows it's yours, he sounds like he would try to push you around. He didn't even tell your mom he was asking you for rent. Neighbor thinks she owns the whole building, then breaks into my apartment. I, 31F, live in a block of 6 units, apartments for non-Australians. A month ago, the unit above mine went up for sale and sold quickly, with a new owner moving in less than a week ago. This morning, I got up to take the rubbish out and found a note stuck to my door. I honestly thought it was a "I'm new to the building" kind of note, but I could not have been more wrong. Dear tenant, I recently bought your building and wish to introduce myself. My name is blah blah, not going to put her actual name, and I think you will find me a fair landlord. However, I do have rules. Everyone is to be in their units by 9 p.m. If you're going to be out past this, I suggest you find accommodation elsewhere. No pets allowed. If you have any, they must be relocated before I do an inspection, or I will call the ranger to remove them. This is the only warning. I will conduct an inspection once a month, and you will be present to answer any questions or face eviction. Failure to pay rent on time will result in your eviction. If we all follow these rules, I'm sure we will get along. Sincerely, blah blah. What did I just read? Fun fact about my building. We all own our units. Nobody actually owns the whole building. I won't lie, I got to number 2 and had a slight panic attack because I have cats and there's no way I was giving them away. Then I remembered we bought our unit just before Christmas. We rented it from a friend prior, and when she told me she was thinking about selling it, we bought it and didn't even have to move. So in some ways, it still feels like renting, but we actually own our unit now. I'm not great at confronting someone. I tend to shake a lot, but at that moment, I was quite angry, so I went upstairs and knocked on her door. You know the gut feeling you have? It was spot on. The door opened, and there stood a Karen. Her hair was blonder than my own, her nails long and brightly colored. She didn't look happy to see me there. I introduced myself and explained that I lived downstairs and wanted to talk to her about her note. She started to talk over me, explaining that her letter was basic rules and even a child could understand it. If I didn't like her rules, I could hand in a letter to vacate. Wow. I would ask if people are really this up themselves, but I work in retail and could answer my own question. I told her that I actually own my unit. She hadn't bought it or the rest of the building, only her own unit, and that she couldn't enforce anything in her note. She didn't like that at all. She started yelling at me, saying that yes, she had indeed bought the whole building and that failure to comply with her rules would mean I would be evicted. I was just starting to think maybe I was wrong when another neighbor opened his door. He came out and asked what the issue was and if she could stop screaming as he worked nights and was trying to sleep. I told him I was trying to explain that she hadn't bought the building, and she started yelling again. My neighbor told her to stop and then said the best thing I had heard that day. Are you stupid? Her jaw dropped as he explained to her how wrong she was and that he was, in fact, part of the strata committee, kind of like an HOA, that oversees the building and that she had no right to make rules for everyone. She gave us dirty looks before slamming the door. I thanked him, and he said that in the entire time he had lived there, he hadn't seen someone so entitled. Update. So I guess this is an update to my last post. I had a lot of people ask me to post if she did anything else. This is also currently happening, and my boyfriend is witnessing it and texting me as I'm at work. So if you missed my last post, I had a new neighbor move into my building, and she left notes on everyone's doors saying she had bought the building and gave us insane rules to follow. She does not own the building but only a unit or apartment. The jury is still out if she is insane or stupid. She has been quiet for the last few days, and I thought maybe that's it. Apparently, I was wrong. Each unit in our building is allocated one parking space, just one. I park in mine, and my boyfriend parks his car on the street on the other side of the building. Our parking lot has one visitor space. It's a very small parking lot with 6 spots for residents and 1 visitor. The visitor spot is nearly always empty, and my neighbors have said my boyfriend could park his car there if he wanted, as we are the only unit with 2 cars, but he doesn't mind parking where he is. This morning, my boyfriend woke up to yelling. Our kitchen window overlooks the parking lot, and he snuck a peek out the window and saw the entitled neighbor standing next to our nice neighbor's car, and they were arguing loudly. She kept yelling that she had a second car and needed to park in his spot and that he had to move his car or else she would have it towed. He kept repeating that it was his parking spot and that she could either park in the visitor's spot or on the street, and if she towed his car, he would report it stolen. My boyfriend said she kept yelling she could park where she wants and that he needed to move it or else. So my boyfriend decided to park his car in my empty spot in case she tried to park there while I'm at work. The last message he sent me said she had stormed upstairs in a huff and slammed her door. Edit. I got home from work, and she has parked her second car in the visitor spot, but she's parked it so badly it's blocking the driveway. Right now, I'm parked on the street, but I'm too tired to deal with her. Edit 2. Sorry I didn't update sooner. Like I said before, her car was basically blocking the driveway, and I had to park on the street. Anyway, when I got up for work the next day, it was still there, but when I came home, it had gone. I asked my boyfriend as he was at home, and apparently, a tow truck came and took it away. I'm still not sure which neighbor called the tow truck, but I have a suspicion it's the one she was arguing with. My boyfriend said she has been quiet all day, only the odd footsteps. Update 2. Well, I'm back. As many of you predicted, her entitlement grew. In case anyone missed the update on my last post, her car was towed, but I don't know which neighbor did it. Sorry, I didn't update sooner. I can't link posts. This made her angrier, but since I was at work, she hasn't blamed me or my boyfriend. It's been raining all week, and as I don't have a dryer, I haven't been able to do any big items like sheets or towels, only clothes, as I can hang them up inside. On Saturday, it was finally sunny, and I raced home from work and dragged my boyfriend out of bed so I could wash all the blankets and dry them in case it rained again. I managed to get through 5 loads of sheets, blankets, and towels and hung them all out on the line outside. We all share it. There are technically 2 different lines for us to use, and we have never had an issue before. I hung out my last load and went inside to chill. I went back out about an hour later to get the first load off and found every single item I had hung out on the ground. Nothing had replaced it. All of it had been torn down, and my pegs and peg basket were gone. Most of what I'd hung out was still wet and now covered in dirt. I got my boyfriend, and he helped me bring everything inside before I went upstairs and knocked on her door. When she answered, I asked if she had taken my washing off the line, and she smugly informed me that she had not given my permission to use her line and that next time I should be polite and ask, and she might let me. Look, I'm going to level with you guys. I work in retail and deal with nightmare customers. I know how to be calm around these kinds of people, and I tried to be polite about this whole thing with the letter and the car, but my bed is my safe space, and I wanted it clean, and she messed with that just to be petty. I calmly told her that everyone could use the line. It's part of the building, and nobody has to ask her permission. She tried to talk over me, but I just held my hand up and told her I was part of the strata committee. I know all the rules and who owns what, and she needs to pull her head out of her ass, grow up, and stop her behavior because it's not doing her any favors. I told her to have a nice day before she slammed her door. Update 3. I was really hoping my neighbor would settle down, but here we are. Though this story has a satisfying ending, I think. This just happened last night, and I'm still a bit tired, so I'm sorry for any spelling mistakes. Our neighbor had been quiet for a while, and my boyfriend and I thought maybe she had finally realized she couldn't control the whole building. One of her cars was parked in her spot, and the other was parked on the street behind my boyfriend's car. Nobody's washing had been ripped off the line, and no new notes were stuck to doors. Until yesterday. As we are the bottom unit apartment, we have a side door that opens out onto the shared yard. I think the only time I use this door is to air the place out or as a shortcut to hang washing out. Anyway, yesterday we were going about our day when we saw the entitled neighbor and a few other people setting up tables and chairs in the yard. No big deal, it's shared space. A few minutes later, there's a knock on the side door, and it's her. My boyfriend opened the door. It's a glass sliding door, so she could see us. We couldn't pretend we weren't there, and did the usual greetings. She told us she was having a party and we needed to move our wooden planters off our patio because she needed the space for her barbecue. No. Firstly, the patio is our space, not shared space. Secondly, they sit right next to the glass door, so I don't want some random person looking into my living room all night while they are cooking. My boyfriend reminded her she doesn't own the building, and we wouldn't be moving anything. One of her friends asked what she was doing as they had already set up the barbecue in the yard. She huffed and walked off without saying anything to us, and we thought that was it. It was not. A few hours went by, and we ended up closing the curtains for privacy. Whoever designed this building didn't really keep privacy in mind. We could hear talking, laughing, and cooking, the usual sounds of a backyard party, when there's another knock on the door. I was cooking dinner, so my boyfriend answered it again. This time it was one of her friends saying she had to use the bathroom, and the entitled neighbor told her to just knock on our door instead of walking upstairs. My boyfriend politely told her sorry, but she couldn't use ours, and she apologized for knocking and intruding. Not even 2 minutes later, there's banging on the door, and by now my boyfriend is pissed. He opened the door, and the entitled neighbor started to lay into him about how dare he expect her guests to go all the way upstairs and that he needed to apologize to her and keep the door open for her guests. Now my boyfriend is usually a calm guy, very easy to talk to and rational, but in that moment he lost his temper. He told her to F off and stop bothering us, to get her head out of her ass, and that she can't lay claim to everything she sees. Our bathroom wasn't hers to use, her guests could use her bathroom, and if she knocked on our door again, he would call the police for harassment. At this point, one of her friends came over and told the entitled neighbor she needed to leave us alone and stop bugging us before apologizing and telling us to have a good night. We expected the party to be loud and go on all night, but it actually wrapped up pretty early, about 1 a.m. I think. This morning when I got up, Everything had been cleaned up from the yard, but our planters had been knocked over. Jokes on her because we hadn't planted anything in them yet, and most of the soil in there was used cat litter. I use potting mix as cat litter because it's cheaper, so now she can smell my cat's old turds. Update 4. Well, I'm back. I thought maybe my neighbor had settled down and I was done with her behavior. I do hear her fighting with the upstairs neighbor now and then, but that's about it. This happened this afternoon, and I'm still trying to figure out how her brain works. In my previous posts, I explained how my new neighbor thinks she owns the building our apartment is in. Newsflash, she doesn't, and she implemented some crazy-ass rules, none of which were legal. It took a few arguments, but I thought she finally understood she didn't own everything. Boy, was I wrong. As I am on the ground floor, I have a glass sliding door that opens out into the shared yard. Not happy about this, but we mainly treat it like a window. Anyway, since it was a nice, cool day, I had the door open but the screen door shut and locked to air the house out after it had rained and the house was smelling musty. Whenever that door is open, my cats will sit at it and watch all the birds outside. I was pretty tired, and my boyfriend suggested we both lay down and have a nap while waiting for the washing machine to finish. I thought, sure, why not? It's quiet today, and we went and laid down. We were woken up about an hour later by a rattling noise in the lounge room. I thought maybe one of the cats had tried to climb the screen door again, so I got up to scold them and found my entitled neighbor trying to open my screen door. She was really pulling on it to the point the whole door was shaking. I asked her what she was doing, and she told me she had seen my cats through the door while on her way to hang clothes out and wanted to pet them, but the door was stuck. I told her it wasn't stuck, it was locked because this is a private residence, and she couldn't just walk in here whenever she pleased. She kept trying to open the door while yelling that I can't keep my cats from people if they want to pet them and it's her right to show them real love. I repeated that this was my home, and she couldn't walk in whenever she wanted. This really seemed to piss her off, and she started to yell at me that I was a little bee and I was abusing my animals, and how dare I speak to her like that. At this point, I was pretty sick of being yelled at in my own home, so I just mustered up the sweetest smile I could before politely telling her to F off. If looks could kill, my cats would be eating my body right now. She tried to open the door again when my boyfriend came out and said he would call the police if she didn't stop. She finally let go of the door, glared at us, and stormed off. Needless to say, we are ordering another camera for that door now, and yes, my cats are microchipped. I thought I might add this as it's been in a few comments. My phone was charging in my bedroom, and I didn't take it out with me when I got up. Where I live, the police aren't very helpful unless it's actually happening, but I didn't want to turn my back on crazy. My boyfriend only got out of bed when he heard shouting because he thought I was talking to the cats. Update 5. So if you're new to the story, here's a brief recap, or you can check my history. My entitled neighbor bought the unit above us and thought she bought the whole building. She hadn't, and she tried to implement some insane rules. She also tried to park in other people's assigned parking and threatened to have our cars towed. Told me I was abusing my cats because I wouldn't let her pet them, and screamed at me because I wouldn't let her friends use my bathroom. Anyway, it's been quiet for a few weeks. I normally hear her arguing with another neighbor all the time, but lately, nothing. Last week, I bought a new car, yay, and it's slightly bigger than my old car, so I'm not confident enough to park it in my spot, so I've been parking on the street. The other day, I got home from work, and I saw a young man standing on her balcony. He was quite friendly, called out hello to me, and introduced himself as her nephew and explained why he was there. She broke her foot. Apparently, at the last family dinner, she tripped over a dog and broke her foot and is now staying with family because she can't get up and down the stairs. He said he was house sitting because she said she didn't trust her neighbors, but he admitted we are all really nice and quiet and maybe she is just crazy. It took all my strength not to sing and dance right there. Update 6. Well, she's back. I was hoping she just wouldn't come back after she broke her foot, but last week we heard a door slam from upstairs. We looked outside, and yep, her car is there. No idea if her nephew who was house sitting is there or not still. Anyway, a few days ago, I tested positive for the much whispered pathogen and have been doing the right thing and staying inside and dying quietly. I'm fully vaccinated, so it's not that bad, though I could live without the headaches. My partner was away all day Saturday because he was picking up his new car, and he got home late Saturday afternoon, parking his new car on the back lawn so he could give it a quick hose down from the drive. I was inside watching through the sliding door when I heard her balcony door open, and she started yelling at him to get off her lawn. He told her to shove it. It's not her lawn, and he is done when he is done. And can she please stop yelling because I have COVID and it doesn't help the migraines? Well, that was a mistake. I heard her storming down the stairs, and she started banging on our door, screaming that I'm diseased and I need to isolate somewhere else before she gets sick, and if I don't leave, she was going to call the police. I told her through the main door that she has been told repeatedly she can't kick us out of our own place that we own. I am staying inside, and that she could call the police if she wanted, but she would more than likely find herself for wasting their time. According to my so, who was coming in after moving his car, she looked downright murderous, but once she saw him, she took off up the stairs. Haven't heard anything from her since or anything from the police, so we think it was an empty threat. I was so tempted to open the door because, like they say, sharing is caring. Edit. Just wanted to add because I've had a few comments on it. We can't get her evicted from her own home as she owns it, just like we own ours. Also, lawyers in Australia are very expensive just to talk to. Like when we bought our unit, the lawyers handling the sale charged us for everything. They stuffed up the paperwork by misspelling my name and then charged us more to reissue the papers with the correct name. As far as I know, my upstairs neighbor spoke to his lawyer about her, but they can't do much anyway. Update 7. I won't lie, I was hoping I would never have to post again and she would become a normal neighbor. I was wrong. So she was so quiet for so long, and her car was barely there. I was starting to think maybe she had moved out, but I got a nice reminder last week that she is still around. To start this story, I must give a brief background. There are 8 units total in this building. I am on the ground floor, and the very nice old lady across the hallway and I have an unspoken rule that if one of us is home and the other isn't, we sign for and accept packages so they just aren't left in the hallway. I had been expecting a package, and I had a feeling it was going to show up while I was at work, but I wasn't worried because of my nice old neighbor. She would drop it off when I got home, no drama, right? Wrong. My nice old neighbor had actually gone away for a few days, so with nobody around, my package was left next to my front door. But it wasn't there when I got home. Oh yes, dear reader, she had it. About 10 minutes after I got home, I heard the familiar stomping on the stairs and the banging on my door. Long story short, my package had been delivered, and she wanted to do the nice thing and hold on to it until I came home, but apparently, it had accidentally ripped and she saw what was inside. I won't lie, it was intimacy toys. I like to treat myself. Sue me. The moment I opened the door, she threw my package at me, yelling how I was a disgusting pervert and I should move out before it spreads. I told her that opening someone else's mail is a crime. It's not a crime to buy those kinds of things, but thanks for taking care of my package. There are people living in my attic. I am on a throwaway account for my safety. You'll find out why soon. To start this story off, I'd like to say I'm not a believer in the paranormal, which could be applied to some of the details if you're an avid believer. Some disclaimers. My area is pretty dangerous. A lot of gangs and crime happen here. My garden is surrounded by fences, and the back one leads to the main road. I suffer from audible and visual hallucinations. I've been living with my dad for around 3 years now, and I have pretty intense mental health issues, so I don't know if I'm being delusional and or detaching from reality. My house is relatively outdated. We have heating that is controlled by a big flame in the center of the house that transports heat through the vents. The majority of the house is made from wood. The floors, the stairs, which are extremely loud and creak a lot when you walk up and down them. We have 3 rooms upstairs, all connected by one hallway. In the middle of that hallway, the entrance to the attic is on the ceiling. My father's door is directly across from mine, and the bathroom door is opposite the stairs banister or railing or whatever you want to call it in between both of our rooms. Remember that it started off as me hearing noises rustling around in the attic, but I figured that a bird had gotten stuck up there. That has happened before. The majority of the noises were in the morning after I woke up and before I went to sleep. The normal times are around 7 to 9 a.m. and 10 to 11 p.m. I asked my father, and he had thought the same, so I shrugged it off. Around 2 to 3 months ago, the noises became more consistent and common, but again, I shrugged it off and drowned it out with music or YouTube videos while I was on my computer. I wouldn't let my paranoia get to me until one night I had woken up around 3 a.m. and I could have sworn that I heard footsteps above me. I heard them moving across the attic floor. I could hear where the noises were coming from and where it was located in the attic. I ran into my father's room to wake him up. I'm not sure if we had startled something up there, but the noises stopped, and my father didn't believe me. He said I was just hearing things. I suffer from audible hallucinations, sometimes visual, so I again shrugged it off as a little reassurance was all that I needed. I hadn't heard anything for a couple of weeks after that, and I'm not sure why. The morning and nightly noises were still persistent. However, we went out one day, my father and I and my dogs. I left my PC on, my door was slightly open, and the bathroom door was closed. I leave my door open out of habit so my dogs can roam around the house when we are home. However, they do their business in the bathroom, so we close the door while they are home because we don't want them doing that. We were out for around 3 to 4 hours. We went on a nice walk. When we got back, I headed back upstairs into my room, and the events that happened are in order. I saw that my door was closed. It must have been a draft. Just before I got into my room, my father shouted up the stairs to me, complaining that I had left milk and a packet of meat out of the fridge. I told him that it wasn't me. My father is a very logical man. He thinks there's always a logical explanation to everything. So he was confused but said he must have done it himself. I was sure that I didn't take anything out of the fridge before going into my room. After the conversation with my father, I saw that the bathroom light was on and the door was wide open. I went to search around the bathroom but couldn't find anything necessarily suspicious. As I walked out of the bathroom, remembering that the banister is facing you when you leave, I had seen some paint chipped away from the banister, something I had never noticed before. All of this could be explained as coincidence. Maybe I did close my door, open the bathroom door, leave the light on, and never noticed paint chipped away on the wooden banisters. Maybe my dad did get some stuff out of the fridge and forgot to put it away. That's how I thought at the moment. I did not want to believe that someone else was living in our house. But when I entered my room and sat down at my computer, I noticed that it was no longer on the YouTube video but on some European food website, which was in English. My computer had no other evidence of being tampered with, just that food website. It could have been a pop-up. Things escalated from there. My father and I kept hearing weird noises in the night and even during the day, bangs and thuds, etc. My father goes to work 5 days a week, leaving at 5 a.m. and getting home around 7 p.m. I don't work, so I'm home to hear everything. A lot of the time, when I'm home, I hear these noises, and my dogs do too, so I know I'm not hallucinating. My dogs started sniffing and peeing around the area underneath the attic latch. I have no idea why. My dogs are 3 to 4 years old at this point, and they've never really peed in a place they haven't before. One Christmas, my dad went on holiday, leaving me alone in the house for a few weeks, probably the scariest time of my life. I'm an adult, I should be able to defend myself, right? Well, everything was fine for the first few days. It was lovely to have time alone. I cooked a lot, spent a lot of time with my dogs, and even made them some nice food too. I had somewhat stockpiled food in my fridge and freezer to last me for a few weeks, meaning I didn't really have to cook much, just microwave and or defrost. A day or two after I had cooked everything, I noticed small things going missing from the refrigerator every day after waking up. I had these snack-sized cheese wheels that I hadn't opened but were open. Some of the food I made was going missing, and I was running out of milk a lot faster than I could have imagined. This persisted for around 3 days before I called a friend to come and stay downstairs. I explained the situation to him, and he was more than happy to stay on the couch for a few days to somewhat protect me. He's not scared of much, and he's very strong, so he could probably fight for himself if he needed to. The very first night he was there, we did a test. We acted as if we were leaving the house and gently slammed the front door to potentially prompt whatever was in my attic to come down and have free reign of the house while we were out. We practically tiptoed back into the center of the living room and sat in silence for about 10 minutes, whispering at most. We heard the noises extremely close to the attic latch, almost like a scratching noise to get their nails under the hatch to open it or something. I have no idea. As my friend heard it, he stamped his foot on the ground to intimidate, assuming that there was somebody up there. Not to mention, my dog started growling at this point too. I knew I wasn't just hearing things, and I had another person for proof. At this point, I was extremely terrified, and my friend, surprisingly, was also scared too. He said that he wouldn't sleep at night if he heard the noises and would stay up all night with me if need be. I quickly responded to him, saying something along the lines of, "No, bro, we're leaving. I'm going to pack my bags, bring the dogs, and we're going to your house." He agreed, and we left for the night. I came back the following afternoon with him to see if anything in the house had changed. There were dishes in the sink that had been used and not washed, food missing from the fridge, and I had switched off all the electrics from the mains before I left, such as PC chargers, lamps, etc. I was sure someone was living in my house somewhere. My PC was on, but luckily, I had a passcode on it, so they couldn't get in. When I recognized that all of this had happened, I called the police. They came and searched all over my house. They didn't go into the attic, they just opened the latch and spoke up into the attic. No reply. They had no explanation for the food going missing and the computer being on, but they couldn't help, apparently. I got some clean clothes, repacked, and left. This time, my friend dropped me off at my mother's, and I stayed there for a few days with my dogs. Upon returning, one of my neighbors caught me just as I was entering the house. They knew my father was away. They said, "We saw 2 people climbing over your garden fence while you were gone," meaning they had jumped over onto the main road and made a run for it. It wasn't unusual for weird stuff to happen in my area, but that was too weird. Most of the time, they hop from garden to garden if they're being chased by police. Anyway, I went into the house as I left it. How it was when I left, nothing had changed, no food had gone missing, and the same dirty dishes were in the sink. And that's the very last time I heard any of the noises. It's been almost a year since I've heard anything or anything strange has happened. Everything is normal, but knowing that people could have been living in my attic mere meters away from me is terrifying. Please let me know what you think because, to this day, I'm still terrified and confused, and I lack the feeling of being safe. What would you have done? Edit. This account is no longer active. Thank you all for your help. I've written down all your suggestions. I made this account for nothing else other than to ask for advice. As for criticism, I appreciate the comments, but I do not care for it. I'm only here for advice on this specific story. I know what happened, and whether or not you believe it is your choice. Thanks again. Goodbye.